Colleagues, we're ready to begin. Good afternoon. The Senate Finance Committee is now in session. And our very first bill, this is it? It's under here, okay. We're starting with Senate Bill 770, and President Ferguson is the sponsor. Oh,
I wish.
Behave.
It still needs a little work, but an interesting issue nonetheless. And thank you, Senator, I appreciate the gesture. Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chairman, members of the Finance Committee, it's a pleasure to be here with you all. As most good bills go, this came very directly out of constituent service work. Earlier, about 3 or 4 years ago, the legislature passed the Flower Branch Act, which required the change for multi-unit apartments to go from interior valves for gas hookups to external regulators and hookups. It was a safety concern, and since the passage of that act, that has been adopted across the country. There are the new standards. And so our utility companies here in Maryland are in the process of, for any substantial renovation where there is an interior valve, to move it to an exterior valve. Well, in the city of Baltimore and the region with BG&E, there is also an adjustment happening going from low pressure systems to medium pressure systems. This requires that all 200,000 ratepayers in the Baltimore region will have to have a switchover of their regulator and the vent from those who are interior to move it to exterior. This is a massive amount of work. It just so happens that the project started 2 blocks away from my house. And so every homeowner that had an interior valve natural gas hookup had to have a line dug up through the sidewalk into the home and flipped over to be an external regulator, which is what it is. It's a safer thing to have happen. The amount of consternation that this brought was enormous, but the biggest challenge was that when you have an old housing stock that's built, in the 1900, 1910, 1915, and subsequently meters were placed on the interior, sometimes as the codes have changed, the basement hookup is now out of code. So while the utility takes on the cost of the replacement for the maintenance and the repair, the homeowner is responsible for upgrading the equipment in order for the utility to be able to access that hookup. And so in some cases, people were having contractors come out and quote, and it was $2,000 to $4,000 that they were forced to expend in order for the utility company to be able to move their hookup from interior to exterior. So this has been a learning experience for me. It turns out, as we were trying to help those who are our low-income neighbors, there were a number of neighbors that sort of had the resources and means to do it. They didn't enjoy it. It wasn't a pleasant experience, but they were able to do it. There were other neighbors who did not have the income to be able to do it, and truly were stuck, and were sort of stuck in a situation of potentially having their gas shut off when went from low pressure to medium pressure. So what this bill before you does is opens up an access portal for resources for our lowest income Marylanders when there is required maintenance to be done by a utility that could potentially pose a shutoff if it's not done. Worked throughout the summer as this was happening, and we were trying to figure out what the right resources might be available. The goal here is to have a fund that would be accessible for income eligible individuals, so that when this required maintenance or upgrading takes place, there is a fund that people can draw from for the interior part of the fix that may be required for this upgrade. You'll notice testimony from the PSC and several other groups. We are working with them. It might not be that the PSC is the right entity to disperse these groups, disperse funds, or to set up the qualifications. We also want to narrow down the qualifications to just those that are required updates to the utility system, not things that are just discretionary maintenance, tree trimmings, those types of things. It is just for when it is a required expense by the homeowner that the lowest income Marylanders have access to some support so that they can have these maintenance and upgrades done appropriately. So we'll have ongoing amendments. So appreciate the sentiment to move favorable, but it still needs a little bit more love, and appreciate the committee's consideration, and look forward to working on this moving forward.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. President, just going on the last part you said, How will this be accessed by the customers? I guess, I mean, is it, well, go ahead.
So that is what has to be figured out specifically,
Okay.
whether it can be a reimbursement or a forward funding grant program. The challenge is that most folks who are in the situation where they can't afford to pay for it don't have some cash reserve that they can forward fund and then get reimbursement afterwards. So that's one of the reasons that the PSC is likely not the best home for this particular fund. The PSC might be the right one to give the qualifications of what would qualify somebody based on the type of upgrade that it's required. But it's probably more likely a DHCD, DHR resource that, in terms of the management of the actual program.
Okay, so the intent would be, though, the customer gets it, it's not a reimbursement directly to the
Correct.
utilities?
Correct.
From this?
Because the customer is in charge of having their utility meter up to code.
Right.
In old building stock, sometimes those codes have changed, and so the amount of clearance that's needed has changed, and so there are huge expenses potentially to access on the interior.
And do you know if this work is part of what's going on with the Stride work? Is that part, it's
So
part of?
it is indirectly related to Stride, but Stride matter, I've gotten my education this past summer, because every single time I walked out of my door, somebody complained about what was happening with these hookups. The Stride program will require many upgrades to hookups to homes. The Flower Branch Act was just multi-unit apartments, but the utilities have gone to the best practice of exterior valves and vents and regulators. And so as upgrades are happening, most of these interior hookups are being converted to exterior, and it's just a massive amount of work.
Right. Okay. Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
So it sounds like what we will need is a work group probably, and to work with the utilities and other entities, the PSC and so on, to figure out exactly how to do this well and in a balanced way.
Precisely, and we will follow up to make sure that we've gotten additional information and bring it to the committee. It is an important point, though, that because of Stride, and because Stride will be moving forward and these upgrades are going to be happening statewide, this is going to be a problem that comes to all of us soon. And so the thought here was if we had a low-income assistance fund, it would be available. It is a statewide problem. Right now, the Baltimore region's in the heart of it, but it will be a challenge moving forward.
Do you feel it would be important to have something that's retroactive for people who were on the front end of this new system and who didn't have the benefit of anything we might work on as to bring them relief if it's needed?
Certainly to the will of the committee. You know, I know that a number of my constituents would certainly appreciate it, but, you know, it is important that moving forward as we do these upgrades, there are a lot of Marylanders who will be very, very surprised, like my constituents were, about what may be required. And so it's an important form of assistance for those who are probably the most vulnerable.
Okay, are there any other questions? Well, thank you very much for bringing this issue to our attention. We'll work on it and keep you apprised. I'll let you know if we have work groups and so on.
Thank you so much.
All
You'll have a wonderful
right.
afternoon.
All right, Senator Riley.
Yes, ma'am.
Senate Bill 715, Public Utilities Transportation Network Operators Age of Motor Vehicles.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, members of the committee. Sitting next to me is one of my neighbors, Jim Obermeyer. And he operates a transportation company, Crofton Coach and Courier. For several years, he's been coming to me with the issue of he has vehicles that he uses for his transportation of his customers. They're inspected every other year, and the Public Service Commission has established what I consider a fairly arbitrary age at which a vehicle must be taken off the road. So this bill is designed to increase the number of years to provide the transportation network services and generally related to motor vehicles used and provide transportation network services. Now, the issue is that 5 years ago, you could buy a used car pretty inexpensively. Well, nowadays, if a operator such as Mr. Obermeyer goes out and wants to buy a used vehicle, the prices are astronomical. So we're trying to get a little bit longer life use out of these vehicles, inspected twice a year by the PSC. And if a vehicle is not worthy because of brakes, emissions from the tailpipe, or emissions along the tailpipe, horn, brakes, lights, wipers, if anything goes wrong, the vehicle's taken off the road. So all of the vehicles we're talking about are inspected and safe. Now, the bill actually has a significant problem. I go to the bill drafter, as we all have, and we ask for a bill to address this issue. And this bill came out under a transportation network operator, our good friends from Lyft and Uber. Well, this bill is not designed to address those two organizations. Madam Chair, you should have an amendment in your packet that narrows this bill to only those who are used in the transportation industry, such as taxicabs, limousines, and transportation operations such as Mr. Overmeyer's. So we're not intending to capture Lyft and Uber in this bill, but rather narrow the scope to those who are using the motor vehicle in a transportation type of activity. Mr. Overmeyer's been in business about 20 years, good corporate citizen, good neighbor. I think it's a reasonable request, so I'm here on not only his behalf. This bill goes a lot farther. You're going to, if you haven't heard, I'll offer it to you. There's 244,000 vehicles that this bill may affect. So it's not necessarily a one-operation bill. It affects a significant number of vendors across the entire state of Maryland. Madam Chair, I request a favorable report by the Finance Committee on this very good bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay. And if should we end up needing a work group, you want to be advised?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you. All right. In that case, then we're going to Jim Overmeyer, Coach and Carrier, Inc.
Okay. Thank you very much, Madam.
You have 2 minutes.
Yes, ma'am, sure. Thank you, Senator Riley, for advancing or for sponsoring this bill. As he said, my name is Jim Overmeyer. I've owned Coach and Courier Incorporated since 1995, 27 years, the entire time under the governance of the Maryland Public Service Commission. We are the oldest, as I understand, for hire carrier. So those are the three different regulatory units that we have. We have limousines. I don't, but there are limousines, taxi cabs, and for hire carriers. We are a for hire carrier. Over the last 27 years, it wasn't until about 10 or 15 years ago when Uber and Lyft were brought onto the picture that we even had a limit on the age of the vehicles, as long as they were inspected twice a year, passed the inspection. And of course, you wanted to be a business that provided a quality service. You didn't want to drive something that rattled going down the road, or you had to hold the door closed with duct tape. So we've always maintained that and kept our business going. We have to stay competitive, and it's hard to stay competitive when you have other businesses like Uber and Lyft who can do it for 2/3 of what you do, because we use employees. We're not independent contractors. They're our own company vehicles and are displayed as such. Typically, we purchase a vehicle that's 5 to 7 years old, put a few thousand into it to get it up to speed, have it inspected by the Public Service Commission, and then we're able to use it for 4 or 5 years and depreciate it, after which time we finally start to make a couple dollars to buy another vehicle. However, as Senator Riley said, I'll just give you an example. The most recent vehicle we added was in 2020, in the midst of the pandemic. Bought a 2013 Honda Odyssey in superb condition. People think it's brand new. And I bought it for $10,600 with 135,000 miles in it. Put 2,000 in it, and it's running like a top. However, I have to take it out of service next year. And the replacement cost of that exact vehicle, now with 180,000 miles, is just under $16,000. So if I was to sell that vehicle, I'm going to go buy another vehicle of the same age with the same miles. So now basically that's one less vehicle we'll have available in our fleet. And one last thing is, you might expect, the industry's been devastated by COVID. We went from making, $20,000, $30,000 in gross revenues per month to literally, in some cases, zero. Businesses went out of business. simply because they just can't, we don't have a strong profit margin in our business due to labor and these operational costs. So it would help us to be able to keep those vehicles 15 years as we did before. In fact, that's about where we would normally have taken these vehicles out of service even before we had a required restriction. And again, it enables us, as long as we're able to keep those vehicles safe, which that's our main goal, keep them safe and in great conditions, but pass that on to our customers so we don't have to charge them $100 to go to the airport. We can charge them more like 55 or 60, which is what our current rates are. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, I have one. In order to show that the cars are worthy of being on the road, do you have sort of a list of things that ought to be regularly or periodically checked?
Yes, ma'am, both corporately and as by the state. The state, under the governance of the Public Service Commission, requires that the vehicles are inspected twice a year. Up until a few years ago, the state actually did one of those inspections, and they required us to go to a state inspection agency, such as a gas station or someplace else. And if you've ever gotten a car inspected, you know you're not coming out of there without something. Headlights, windshield wipers, something, brake pads. And routinely, we get out of there fairly safe, so without many expenses, because we put our vehicles in the shop every month. We routinely maintain them because we don't want to break down on the road, and I don't want to have to go out at 4 in the morning and bail somebody out. So when you see our vehicles, they look good and they're safe. But yes, ma'am, there are a list of things, and when we purchase that vehicle, before we place it into service, the Public Service Commission requires a full inspection of all safety assets, or a safety inspection, as well as certificate of insurance and expectation of life expectancy of the vehicle.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, seeing none, thanks so much for the bill and for your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay. We're going next to Senate Bill 789, Senator Feldman, our Vice Chair, Public Utilities Underground Facilities One Call System. Senator, you have whatever time you need to lay out your bill, and your witnesses will have 2 minutes
All right,
each.
I've got, maybe can I bring my two panelists? Why don't you guys
Okay,
come with me?
that's fine.
Table.
James Barron and Bruce Bariano.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, as you may recall, we passed a bill a week or two ago here in the committee that I sponsored with Senator Hershey, dealing with the Maryland Underground Facilities Damage Prevention Authority that we created here in the legislature to protect underground facilities such as natural gas, telephone, cable, television, water, and sewer lines. And that authority, if you remember, hears complaints and can assess civil penalties for violations of the laws protecting our underground facilities. So in the same regard, when there's an excavation and demolition of these underground facilities, and when those are being done, there are various markings that need to be done. And we have the Maryland One Call System. Miss Utility is also known as the One Call Center that handles and coordinates all of the calls requesting markings. Right now, Madam Chair, members of the committee, that system is overloaded. The facility owners and their contract locators who are responsible for responding to the request for marking of those facilities, in many cases we're talking about the utilities, have become swamped by high volume. In turn, that means that their ability to respond in a timely fashion has been compromised, and that has caused delays for the contractors who rely on these markings to safely do their work. Additionally, to even complicate matters more, we're currently going through a labor market crisis due to the pandemic, and that's depleted the contract locating industry workforce, which provides the utility marking services to the facility owners that I just described. So what's Senate Bill 789 do? So it makes a few changes to the current Title 12 governing all this regarding requests for markings, missed utility tickets, and these changes of the current law are designed to help contractors more accurately describe their work area, not just the type of work, thus avoiding multiple ticket updates. And also the ticket is valid for 12 days after the One Call System issues the ticket, but a lot of notice requirements have to be done within this 12-day period. There's given the facility owners and their contract locator more flexibility is important here in managing their ticket responses in extreme volumes. So we're essentially replacing the current mandatory response and construction dates with construction dates selected by the contractor. The goal here, Madam Chair, just to cut to the chase, is by passing this Bill 789, the facility owners and their contract locators will have some additional time and flexibility to respond to the missed utility ticket requests for the markings. It'll also provide the contractors the benefit of the full 12-day ticket life. And so that is basically what we're trying to do, Madam Chair. There is an amendment in the packet that I've submitted. Two of the amendments are technical. One would change the effective date of the bill from October 1st back to June 1st. And then you see the bill is drafted. It references 2 days. Work can't be done prior to 2 days. We're changing it from 2 to 3 days. Those are the amendments. There is no opposition from anybody. The one thing I did want to bring to the attention of the committee is if you look at the fiscal note, you'll see on page 3, Madam Chair, under state fiscal effect, there's a statement here that says that MDOT advises that the bill may negatively affect its ability to respond to emergency situations that must be completed as soon as possible to maintain safe operations. Specifically, under the bill, MDOT must wait 2 business days after the tickets initiated before work can start, and the bill does not include any exceptions to this requirement for emergency situations. So straight up, whoever wrote that or whoever advised the fiscal note writer from MDOT clearly did not read the entire code. There's actually a very specific section in 12.121 for emergency excavation demolition work. So this bill has nothing to do with that code section dealing with emergencies. If a ticket is, and under those provisions, if a ticket's initiated as an emergency ticket, then that whole regime kicks in, and in that case, immediate action is required. So this bill does not impact that. So this is misguided, this statement. If for whatever reason the committee council thinks we need some kind of clarifying amendment to say that, these provisions do not apply to emergency tickets, we can stick that in. I think it's unnecessary because we have this separate code section dealing with emergency situations. So that's the only, I wouldn't even call it pushback, misstatement that's in the fiscal note. But that said, we do have Mr. Veriano here. We have Mr. Barron from the authority, so can answer any kind of technical questions about what this all means and why the bill is needed. And therefore, I'd ask for a favorable on Senate Bill 789 with the amendment that I just mentioned earlier, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the sponsor? Okay, if not, then let's go to Mr. Veriano.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and members of the Senate Finance Committee. For the record, Bruce Barriano here on behalf of One Call Miss Utility. The Vice Chairman did a spectacular job. He said everything that needed to be said. It's a great explanation. This bill is very much needed, given the reasons that were indicated by the Vice Chairman. I will say that MACO and MML have no opposition. They've emailed me. They have no opposition to this bill. All the stakeholders that worked on the language in this bill, the utility companies, Comcast, Washington Gas, Chesapeake, name them all. They were all a part of this. The fiscal note's already been clarified by the Vice Chairman. Thank you very much. And the amendments, they're also, and I just say this only because respectfully the Vice Chairman did not indicate it, but there are also 3 places, I think you have the amendments, but 3 places that in front of the word work, we put the word start. So the phrase is start work date. And I'll check with your counsel to make sure he has those. I believe they were in there originally, but thank you again very much. The reason for the bill's been quite properly explained, and we thank you and urge a favorable report.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Veriano? Senator Kramer?
And thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure this is going to be appropriate for my good friend, Mr. Barriano, or perhaps our next witness to offer some information, so I'll be happy to wait and see, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
all right, we'll wait for the next witness then. All right, and that is James Barron.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jim Barron. I'm the Executive Director for the Maryland Underground Facilities Damage Prevention Authority. We are the enforcement authority for the Public Utilities Title 12 statute, and I'm here to testify today in favor of 789. The Vice Chair and Mr. Briano has certainly hit all the main points and benefits of this legislation, so I'd be happy to entertain any questions at this point. There's nothing further I can add. I think they both did an eloquent job of putting out the points that are very important in this legislation.
Okay, Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Then just if we can quickly revisit the bill sponsor's comments about 12-121 in the Public Utilities article and the issue of emergency excavation demolition. Let's say homeowner pulls down their driveway, sees this little geyser coming out from the middle of the lawn. Been a big problem for a lot of jurisdictions. I know Montgomery County, Prince George's County, by virtue of having WSSC, which had approved polybutylene pipe for water service, and lots of folks have had to have their yards dug up on what I think should be considered an emergency basis, because obviously their water service has to be turned off. Would that be a scenario where this 12-121 applies? Because specifically it makes reference to life, health, or property as the emergency. So I guess the question is, how is that interpreted? And would this in any way, shape, or form slow down the process for someone in a circumstance like that, or perhaps something comparable?
Jim?
I believe the authority would look at that it would be considered an emergency. I mean, if a home loses their water supply, they also lose their sewage supplies, and particularly if it's in what month of the year it happens in. So I think in that particular case, the facility owner would put in the emergency ticket, and 12-121 would kick into gear, and the facility owners or their contract locators would need to contact the individual that's going to do the repairs within 2 hours and begin their marking operation within 3. So I believe that the emergency statute as defined in 12-101 and as further implemented in 12-121 would kick in gear at that particular time. Yeah. Now, it wouldn't be the homeowner would call it in. It would be the facility owner that operates that particular water service who put the
Well,
emergency
but if
ticket.
it's on the owner's side of the curb box, then it's the owner's responsibility.
You're correct. It would be the owner, but
So
they'd have
the
to
owner
get the
would be
plumber then at
calling
that
it
point.
in, and would it then be the plumber?
Correct.
And would it still be given that same consideration, assuming it's on the resident side of the curb box? All of this is still applicable as far as emergency, is that?
Well, the way the statute reads is, yeah, you're correct, it would be the plumber that would call it in, but the Miss Utility system would never deny a ticket. If that plumber called in an emergency ticket, it would get sent out to the facility owners as an emergency ticket. And the plumber could begin his operations immediately. It could come under review by the authority, but it states clearly in 12-121 that if it's a true emergency by definition under 12-101, the authority would have no enforcement authority over any part of Part 4 of the statute. So there'd be no fines assessed, nothing at that point.
And in real practice, you're comfortable that that would be how it plays out, not just, well, this is what's in statute, but in daily practice, it's your experience that this is the way it plays out, and we would not be jeopardizing that kind of a response with passage of this bill?
I don't think it would jeopardize it one bit. I was a contractor myself for 40 years, and I would think that this would be viewed by everybody as a statute. But the authority wouldn't even address this unless somebody filed a formal complaint with us.
The one-call system, and I represent one-call Miss Utility, not just the authority.
Yeah,
As
but
Mr.
unless, of course, the contractor hits some other utility while trying to do the repair, and then That's, I guess, where I'm trying to, are they protected if that were to happen? In other words, would Miss Utility still come out and market?
Yes,
Yes,
Okay,
Yes.
but they'll do it under an emergency
within 2 hours.
scenario?
Yes.
correct.
Got it.
The
Okay,
locating process has to begin within 3 hours
okay.
after the ticket is released from the center. So I believe everything would be
Status
copacetic
quo.
and it would not apply.
And to further assure you, Senator, as Mr. Barron indicated, the one-call center, who I also represent, they get a call in on an emergency ticket. They just assume it's an emergency. They don't get into, well, tell me about it
Analyzing
judgment.
it.
Someone says it's an emergency, they do it right away.
Got it.
In other words, that kicks in rather than the normal process.
Okay, thank you for all that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? If not, then that ends the testimony
Thank you.
on
Thank you again, Mr. Vice Chair.
789. We're going next to Senate Bill 782, Senator Hester. And Senator, you'll have whatever time you need to lay out the particulars of your bill, and then each of your witnesses will have 2 minutes each.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Finance Committee. It's my first time here this year. It's good to see you all. For the record, Senator Katie Fry Hester, proud to represent District 9, Howard and Carroll counties, here for your consideration of Senate Bill 782. This is a simple bill which will address a complex issue. As you all know, and this committee knows better than most, COVID-19 has presented a multiple of challenges on our small businesses. Though the unemployment rate has decreased since April 2020, the pandemic has changed, and so much has our approach to economic recovery. Our economy is diverse, with heavy concentrations not only of professional, scientific, and technical resources in some areas, but also manufacturing, tourism, and skilled trade in others. Therefore, a one-size-fits-all to recovery just doesn't fit. The intent of Senate Bill 782 is to establish a short-term work group to study and draft recommendations on how to adjust our economic development strategies resulting from significant challenges and changes and crises in a variety of sectors. Specifically, the work group will look at remote unemployment, supply chain management, childcare, commercial and residential real estate, and our small Main Street businesses. Most of the bill is articulating who is on this work group, which currently includes members of the Senate, members of the House, and private sector representatives. There are many amendments coming of other people who want to be on this bill as well, which I welcome. The work group will be chaired by and includes funding for the best and the brightest at the University of Maryland who want to take this on. Colleagues, you're probably asking me why another work group and why now? According to FEMA, when a small business suffers a natural disaster, the initial stabilization takes approximately 2 to 4 weeks. And then the short-term recovery may take 2 to 4 months. But the real long-term recovery takes 3 to 5 years. And we are just coming out of, hopefully, the COVID-19 pandemic. But we're only in a year, about 2.5, of some of these small businesses having to face drastic changes. It's going to be a couple more years before we can return to normal. Secondly, in terms of a strategic intervention now in the prelude to an administrative change, this work group would be able to take a look at all the good economic development policy that we've put forward as a state in the past few years and prepare a list of what's worked and what hasn't worked. This report then would come out at the end of December of 2022, just in time for the new administration to look at the recommendations and say, hey, we've done some research, this is what we have, and this is where we need to go. So, I feel strongly that this is a really good bill. Like I said, it's a simple bill to address a complex issue. And the group would sunset after its first and second report. And so I think the time is right, and for those reasons, and on behalf of all the small businesses in the state of Maryland, I ask for your favorable report on Senate Bill 782.
Thank you. And we're welcoming Senator Griffiths, who's here representing B&T, because the bill has been jointly referred. Okay. Are there any questions of the sponsor? All right. If not, then we're going to Paul Bardack. Each of these witnesses will have 2 minutes each.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senators. And it's really good seeing my own hometown senator and friend, Ben Kramer. Good seeing you, Senator. My name is Paul Bardack. I head the Maryland Small Business Development Center. As most of you know, we are by far the state's largest small business assistance organization. And I therefore speak in support of today's legislation, SB 782. Since the pandemic began, we've had a pretty good view of what's going on within our state's small business sector. And as Charles Dickens wrote, it is the best of times, it is the worst of times. In the last 2 years, my organization and our staff have served over 14,000 Maryland entrepreneurs, helped them raise more than $240 million of new capital, helped keep in our state or grow within our state more than 66,000 jobs, and even in the midst of despair that characterizes this time in our state's history, we even helped some 545 entrepreneurs start brand-new businesses. If Dickens were to write about what I just shared, these are the best of times, but they're also the worst of times. The National Federation of Independent Businesses, just in their recent monthly survey last month, showed that most small business owners in our state are pessimistic about their future. Most are not looking for new capital because they're not confident in the short term of growing. And even just anecdotally, when we go to the nearby shopping centers, malls, and so forth, how many stores, restaurants, retail shops, bars, and so on, dry cleaners, do we see now out of business? Property for lease, that sort of thing. So if Charles Dickens were writing, this would be the worst of times as well. We need a path forward. If my organization knew what tomorrow's industries might be, where the state wishes to put its resources, we'd know which kinds of new trainings to support, what kind of new skills to hire and bring on board our staff. This bill creates that path forward through a diverse working group of people who will come together with a vision to help my organization and other statewide and more local economic development organizations prepare for a future that, frankly, we just don't know what to prepare for. So we think it's a great bill. We support it, and I thank you for allowing me to testify in support.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? All right, if not, then we will move on to Donna Edwards.
Good afternoon. I'm Donna Edwards. I'm the president of the Maryland State and DC AFL-CIO. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and members of this committee. I have missed you. This used to be where I'm always at, so it's very good to see you in person. You have our written testimony. I want to say that we think that this is a really good idea and a bill that time has come, but it's missing. If we want to be as diverse and have a conversation that really is as inclusive as it could be, we are asking to support with an amendment, and that amendment would be to add 5 members of the labor sector representing the sectors that are identified in the bill. And to let you know, the future of work has been on the mind of the AFL-CIO now for several years. And even at our last convention, which was maybe 4 years ago, we passed a future of work where we've delved into where is this economy going to be in 2030, 2040. And hundreds of thousands of workers were majorly impacted during this pandemic crisis. And we've got to prepare for the future. BLS actually projects that by 2028, there will be hundreds of thousands of middle-skilled and middle-paying jobs lost. Now, there's going to be other jobs created in, health care and home care and child care and technology. But we're preparing for, the movement of the workforce. And we want to do that in concert with our businesses in Maryland. So we would ask that you do give a favorable report to Senate Bill 782, but with the amendment to add 5 members of our labor in the accordance with the labor sectors that you're going to be looking at in this work group. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right. We're going next to Christina Plush.
Great, thank you. I'm Christina Push, Executive Director of the Maryland State Child Care Association, representing over 5,000 child care professionals working in Maryland. MSCC is appreciative of Senator Hester and Rosa Pep's efforts on Senate Bill 782 and for the recognition of the child care providers as critical members of the business sector whose input into the state's economic recovery is important. We believe child care is an essential economic imperative. Senate Bill 782 requires that a member of this work group represent the child care sector, and we are excited to be included. Child care was tenuous before the pandemic. It is a tuition-dependent small business on the backs of working families, primarily owned and operated by diverse women of color. We have heard from the Maryland Chambers, and many parents are struggling to find child care and have made child care a priority. It is necessary to have consistent licensed child care options to return to or reenter the workforce. And child care impacts the workforce, and you don't even have to have children to be affected. Employers and coworkers need workers who are able to come to work and be productive. Maryland has lost over 900 child care businesses and tens of thousands of slots. So child care participation in this work group would be impactful and an asset. MSCCA is grateful if given the chance to provide data and expertise, as well as to collaborate with such knowledgeable representatives in the work group in order to connect the dots of child care and the economy for a successful future. We urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Reedy.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'm just, Christina, I'm glad you could be here today, and I'm glad that this is a part of this bill. I know that child care has been a big topic of conversation this session. I've spent my interim trying to help child care providers in my community, because one of the things we hear about a lot is that there's lack of access. But one of the reasons there's a lack of access is because we still have rules governing how long a child care center has to shut down when there's one positive case of a toddler. And it's frankly, in my opinion, absurd the way this is still going on this way when we've changed everything else in society. So I wonder if you could just comment on the challenges. Besides, there is certainly a need for more providers, but there's also the ones we have been sort of artificially constricted. I don't know if you would agree with that, or if you could comment on that.
Yes, thank you. Definitely, MSCC has met with the health department numerous times to discuss this, really particular just to our industry, having to shut down for one positive case of COVID, even though we've excluded the child or the staff worker, even though we put the information out to all the families, it just doesn't seem to resonate. So there's been a lot of disruption to the workforce because of these types of continuous shutdowns, on top of the fact that we've lost over 10% of our workforce in our own state. So it's been challenging all the way around for the pandemic in many different ways, and it's impacted a lot of women primarily.
Yes, and I know generally a lot of times these child care centers are women-owned, and you mentioned minority and women-owned businesses. Do you guys represent home daycare as well, or is that like a separate group?
So we represent about 10% of our membership is family child care providers, and also we partner with the Maryland State Family Child Care Association, who has their own representation in Maryland. We have robust associations, which is great, and they also support this legislation.
That's good to know, because they've really been taking it on the chin as well, and that's a way that might be, that's a business that people can get into, but it's difficult. We made it difficult. I think that I'm excited.
Highly regulated.
I'm excited about the bill. I think it's good they're studying this issue and other issues too. So thank you for being here today. Thanks for your answers.
All right, are there other questions? Okay, if not, then thank you for your testimony, and that ends the testimony on
Thank
this
you.
bill.
Thank you.
Thank you, committee.
Okay. Senator Edwards, Senate Bill 846, Economic Development, Maryland Tech Infrastructure Pilot Program Establishment. And I'm going to call up Troy LaMelle-Stovall from Petco. Okay. The sponsors have as much time as you need to lay out your bill, and your persons testifying will have 2 minutes each.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. Senator Edwards, District 1 for the record. Senate Bill 846 is a product of the Western Maryland Economic Development Task Force, which was established, I think, 2 years ago in legislation to look at the three western counties.
You
It's
might want to pull that mic up. So it's a little closer. Just push it up. Yeah.
It won't go up.
Can you do that?
I'll stand over here. How's that?
It's better.
Thank you. It was established, as I said, a couple of years ago to look at what we might be able to do to help out the economy in western Maryland, which in this case is the three counties, Garrett, Allegheny, and Washington counties. This is one of 6 or 7 bills that we came up with, approaches to help the economy out there. And it establishes a Maryland infrastructure pilot program in western Maryland, as the three counties I mentioned, a 5-year pilot. This is to support the innovation economy in the area. Put the fund in place, the maximum amount per project can be $500,000, not to exceed that, to attract investment and job creation. It's established within TEDCO as a non-lapsing fund. An authority specifically for the Maryland Technology Infrastructure Fund is established. It doesn't mandate, you see in a fiscal note, a commentary about $2.5 million, but this doesn't mandate any money from the state, although it'd be nice if they did. So kind of left up to the governor if he wants to put any money in, he or she, whoever next governor is, into this pot. But it sets it up and anybody could put some money in, and the money would be handled by the treasurer, just like a lot of other independent funds that we have. They would invest it, whatever, that money go back into the pot, but the authority would be there to be able to say how they were going to hand it out. Authority is set up within TEDCO, as I mentioned, to make decisions on the fund, how it would be spent, and what projects would get funded. After the 5 years, there would be a decision made as to whether to make this a statewide program. So as I mentioned, it's a pilot program. It isn't mandating money from state. Be nice they put some in there to get this started on a more quicker basis. Would ask for your support of this bill, as we see this as a very helpful tool, and I think TEDCO supports this because they would look at it as a pilot and maybe then make it a statewide thing if this works out within TEDCO where it would sit. So I'll be happy to try to answer any question, Madam Chair.
All right, are there any questions? All right, if not, then we're going to Mr. Mel Stovall of TEDCO. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Thank you. It's good seeing everyone. Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. My name, as Senator Kelly said, is Troy Lamel Stovall. I'm the CEO of TEDCO. And yes, we are very much in support of Bill 846. I want to appreciate Senator Edwards for bringing this. You know, for us, we think about this as a regional pilot, as he mentioned already, but that could have statewide impact. And we actually do like doing pilots. And so we're actually already very engaged in Western Maryland, as he mentioned, the task force. The task force had membership from TEDCO on that task force. We already do a pilot through our Maryland Innovation Initiative, where we're looking at how do we change and look at, if you don't know, our MII looks at our 5 research institutions. So we're looking at how do we involve the non-research institutions. So one of the pilot institutions that we're working with is Frostburg, along with Bowie State, to see how we can find a different model to really engage the entrepreneurship elements that exist at our non-research institutions. I myself plan on visiting Western Maryland at the end of March, and so TEDCO is very much involved and very engaged with Western Maryland, and we fully support this. And I'll close with, this is about ensuring that wherever that entrepreneur, whatever zip code that entrepreneur is in, they have full access to the full resource they need for their success. So again, we support this effort, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Augustine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really think this is great. I do. What, though, would be one of these projects that, because it's not really defined in here, but I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, what the kind of the projects that are envisioned for this?
Yes, sir. If I may. So one of the things that we know Western Maryland's in need of is a deeper set of incubators and maker spaces, and so that would be some of the things that we would look at. We'd also look at how do we make sure that, you know, one of the things, as you know, Senator Augustine, we have an effort called the Rural Business Innovation Initiative, RBII. And that's really for 2 things. One, it's allowing us to place early-stage equity investments in companies. But the second thing it does, it knits together the resource that exists in that geographic area. Well, those resources aren't available to knit together, you can't do it. So part of this is to create those resources or scale those resources so that we can see what's really needed there in Western Maryland. So part of this, frankly, is to look at what Western Maryland needs and then go down this path of understanding, is it makerspaces, is it wet labs? What's already there that needs to be created and what needs to be maybe scaled higher?
Okay, and just a follow-up, I was just trying to look in the bill. It references Frostburg. You mentioned Bowie State, because I remember last year we incorporated the two of them in this process. Is Bowie State in this bill?
Not in this. So I mentioned that more because that's what we're doing with Maryland Innovation Initiative. So that's a separate effort, but related, because that effort, let me be a little bit more detail on that. So as you hope you know, we have an effort called the Maryland Innovation Initiative. It's with our 5 research institutions where we help to de-risk and commercialize the lab work and bring that to fruition, and we make investments in that. But that doesn't include all of our other institutions, right? Think places like Bowie State or Frostburg State. So through your efforts, we have this MII pilot for the next 2 years where we're looking at what are the things that we need to put together what an MII, what I'm calling version 2 would look like. And so Frostburg happens to be one of those institutions. And so it's Frostburg and Bowie State. Bowie State is separate from this bill, but Frostburg clearly will be part of what we do here.
Okay, I really appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, if not, thank you very much for your testimony, and that ends the hearing on this bill.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going next to Senate Bill 826, Senator Meyer, and we will bring up your panelists, Steve McHenry and William Paulshock. Senator, you have as much time as you need to lay out the parameters of your bill, and your witnesses will have 2 minutes each.
I don't see my witnesses right now, but thank you, Madam Chair and the committee. As we all know, the Chesapeake Bay is a treasure in our state, and what makes it so wonderful, besides the recreational part, is the idea that we do have fishermen and watermen that do the fishing. They get the fish, they get the clams, they get the oysters to feed us all. But right now they're having a bit of a problem, and it's been an ongoing problem, but the COVID has really enhanced that problem. So with that, I would just like to say Maryland's iconic seafood industry has contributed greatly to Maryland's economy and stature as a wonderful tourist destination and a great place to live. Maryland watermen, now a rapidly aging group, have historically had a difficult time assessing affordable commercial capital and credit. Senate Bill 826 aims to address that issue by providing small, short-term, low-interest loans to eligible Maryland watermen to help them get through the leaner times, such as what has happened in the past few years due to the COVID-19 pandemic's effect on the restaurant industry. The program would be run by the Maryland Agriculture and Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, MARBITCO, which already runs similar loan funds involving aquaculture. The bill would require a mandated appropriation of $750,000 for 2 years to fund a program starting in fiscal year 2024. This will enable MARBITCO to provide approximately 50 to 100 loans during the first 2 years to eligible watermen who make their living by fishing. These will only be small loans ranging from $7,000 to $15,000. I am accompanied by my sponsor panel.
Okay.
Okay.
Did the following people come in?
And I was afraid they weren't there. I looked, they weren't there. Who go into more detail on the specifics of this program and how the loans will work. And I thank the committee for their consideration of Senate Bill 826, and I am requesting a favorable report. But some of the loan proceeds can be used to purchase shell, seed, spat, or equipment that would be very, very helpful to help these fisher, well, I shouldn't say fishermen, fisher people.
Waterman. Okay, are there
To
any questions for the
sustain themselves.
sponsor? All right, if not, then we're going to hear from Steve McHenry and from William Paulshaw.
Yes, and Madam Chairman, I just want to say that we had some fishermen ready to come today, but I believe they got caught up and they were working. The weather's getting nicer and they're out working the boats.
Okay.
You do have a couple pictures.
Oh, you do?
All right.
Okay, okay.
And gentlemen, you have 2 minutes each.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. My name is Steve McHenry. I'm Executive Director of the Maryland Agricultural Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, much better known as Marbitco. It's a pleasure to be before you again. It's been some years since I've been here, and it's good to be back in person. I want to thank the sponsor and Mr. Paulshak to my right for bringing this idea to us to see if we could develop a program that would truly be a benefit to our traditional commercial watermen who have had some challenges over the years, and more particularly during the pandemic when the restaurants shut down for a substantial period of time. What's before you today is a program that would be funded over 2 years that would allow us to create a specialty microloan program modeled on 2 other programs that we run, one for the DNR and another for the Southern Maryland Ag Development Commission, with the resources they've given us to set up a revolving loan program for, in this case, for the commercial watermen. The loans would be very favorably termed, 3% interest, and for good repayment performance, we would forgive the last year of the term of the loan. So, in effect, about just under a $3,000 grant on a $15,000 loan with a 4-year amortization, again with the last year forgiven. So we, again, are encouraged by this program. I think there's support building for this. I think folks are requesting a supplemental budget request to the governor to try to get this program started a little earlier. The bill requires a mandate in '24. We certainly could offer this program this summer if the funds were available. So with that, Madam Chairman, I will be happy to answer any questions, but I want to turn it over to Mr. Paulshak, who really has been the driving force on this piece of legislation.
Okay, any questions for Mr. McHenry? Okay, then we're going on to Mr. Paulshaw.
Very good. Bill Paulshock, Baltimore County. Our men and women, generational watermen, have been struggling for years. And this COVID pandemic crisis has crippled their industry even more. In 2011, there was 4,500 generational watermen farming our bay. Today, only 1,200 to 1,300 active. Shocking. Our generational watermen create over $600 million of economic activity annually throughout our year across our state. And tens of thousands of jobs are supported by these men and women farmers of our bay. These generational watermen are the Chesapeake Bay's greatest treasure. They keep it balanced and they keep it healthy. These generational watermen are the economic of the entire Maryland seafood industry. They are essential. We want to thank Senator Kathy Meyer and the bipartisan support we're receiving across, because you're giving these men and women, this generational hope, and not just hope for this generation, but hope for the next generation, their children, their crew, and people in our community who want to be farmers of the bay. They are essential to this state, and they are essential to the people across this state who enjoy the fruits that they harvest from our bay. And I just want to thank you. You guys got hard work down here, but we just want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this, and hope you can help, because they're calling for it. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Augustine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I like this a lot. I'm curious with the size of this micro loan, could you just share maybe like what it would do, like what they would use that micro loan for and how that would be so helpful to them?
Okay, can I speak a little?
they're going to give you, these men and women, Watermen, are going to give you the true history of it. But I will tell you, Mother Nature is brutal. It's brutal for our land farmers, and it's extremely brutal for our watermen. Equipment failure, need, everything has escalated. And they need help like the land farmers do. And if we don't, you listen to these stories, you'll hear exactly the need and how it's going to support and what it's going to help out with. It's just positive.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
And if I could add, Madam Chairman, these would be unsecured loans. So Watermen have a tough time getting bank loans because they don't have collateral security available to undergird those loans. These would be unsecured loans, which we are equipped to be able to do. So that's an advantage for these Watermen.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you. Now we have additional witnesses. We'll call up Moochie Gilmer, Julia House, Crystal Jordan, and Blair Baltus. Okay. Let's see, we've got room for one more, so we'll call up also Herman Harrison. Okay, all right. Okay. All right. But you guys going, all right. You may do it that way.
Who wants to be first?
I can go.
All right.
Hi, how you doing today? My name is Crystal Jordan. I've worked on the bay since I was a kid at 10.
Pull your mic around towards your mouth, yeah.
Sure
And
thing.
those mics
Sorry.
are movable.
I'm new to this, sorry. I can start over. My name is Crystal Jordan. I've worked on the bay since I was a kid at 10. Jumping forward 9 years later, I was a full-time crew member for my father, who was, to me, was Superman. Excuse me. He was diagnosed that year, 2005, with terminal brain cancer, and in 1 year passed. We had sold the entire rig to pay for cancer treatments. I was heartbroken and down with just the license and thankfully a boat. A whole new rig to buy was impossible, so I built what I could, and I bought cheap the old pots from fellow watermen that they didn't want in their rig anymore. In today's economy, the higher expenses and cost of living would be next to impossible to succeed with. We are here because we love what we do. We are here because this is our life. To have access to a small loan as this for today's hardships and our future generations, watermen, women, and fellow crew members, could be just what we may need to keep a roof over someone's head and food on the table. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? All right, we're going into Julia House.
Thank you. Julia Howes, resident of Anne Arundel County, TFL license 1419. We have a family-owned business with my husband, and he is a third-generation waterman. Similar to Crystal, he has been working on the water since he was about 4 or 5, had his own boat, and has started his own company at 12. In 2019, our crab pots were only $23. The crab pots that we just ordered first season on April 1st were $36 each. The average rig runs about 500 to 600 crab pots. Gas, bait, the maintenance on boat, all of it is increasing. We've recently started in the aquaculture process with oysters, and it's expensive to start. We want to continue preserving and having the future, and this loan could help someone with that kind of business to keep oysters and aquaculture going. We operate 2 boats, one for oystering and one for crabbing and fishing. There's constantly something breaking down or something going on, and these microloans could certainly help with those unexpected expenses. Watermen are small business owners. We pay taxes, we employ people, and we contribute to the community. Local seafood is important to our economy and the growth of our seafood industry. These microloans will certainly help keep our business thriving and to help with those unexpected expenses. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? All right. If not, then we're going on to Crystal
Hi.
Jordan. Okay. Okay.
I'm Moochie Gilmer.
Okay.
A couple of the black captains wanted to be here from the Maryland Black Captains Association today, but they could not be here because they got called into Coast Guard inspections today. So I've been asked to speak on their behalf.
Thank you.
Yeah. Having been around them for most of my entire life, I've seen the struggles with finances for many reasons. We all know the important parts of everyone being able to have access to loans during tough times, either for motors, boat repairs, and other issues that just come along with everyday part of doing business. And they wanted to say thank you for all your support during this COVID from the legislature and from the governor. In my personal experience, when I was young, I was lucky enough that we were known in a neighborhood where we could go to our local bank and get a loan just on your name or your family. That doesn't happen anymore, as everybody knows. So the reason that I got together with Bill and Steve and everybody else in here and worked on this is to make it accessible for our younger people to be able to get money. I'm turning 68 this year. I'll get through this one way or another, but these young people need this to get you through a motor repair, any little issue that comes along, without having to sacrifice something that you already have. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Senator Hershey?
Madam Chair, maybe just two statements, but I understand fully what you're saying. I've heard from a lot of watermen that have been trying to get loans, and unfortunately, a lot of it is just the uncertainty of the business now. And more unfortunately, that relies a lot on some of the policies and regulations that have come out of the General Assembly. So I'm very much in favor of anything that we can do to help the watermen. And in fact, I have a bill in two bills later that's going to address that as well. But I do want to follow up, and I appreciate you coming to represent the black watermen. If anyone hasn't seen yet, WBAL ran a special. I saw it on Sunday morning. Many of us know Amy Lou. She used to cover from the Lower Shore. Now she's working for WBAL. She did a great feature about the black watermen that are still working the bay. And the one most moving comment from the whole thing as I was leaving, the captain said, even with all this going on, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Right.
So I want to thank all of you for all the hard work that you do on the Chesapeake Bay. And I know life isn't easy for you guys, and hopefully we can find some ways to help you this year.
Okay.
Yeah, because actually, Buck Lynch that was in that, and Tyrone Meredith, we're going to try to make it here today. And then the Coast Guard said, we're ready to start these inspections. So I told them I would speak for them.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. We're going to hear next from Julia Howes.
I spoke already.
Oh, okay. Did we hear from Crystal? Okay, Blair
Yes, ma'am.
and Herman. All right, I guess that's everybody.
No, he's getting ready to speak.
Okay, all right.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Blair Baltus, President of Baltimore County Woodrum Association and member of the Board of Directors of the Maryland Woodrum Association. Today, I'm representing both since Robert T. Brown is testifying on the environmental side today. Becoming a waterman is not an occupation you think of becoming while you're sitting in 11th grade math class. In most cases, it's passed down from grandparents and parents becoming generational. In today's world, the cost of doing business is increasing daily, from boats to trucks to fuel, the equipment you need to carry on the trade. Harvesting licenses are hard to come by since there is a freeze on new licenses. The only way to really get one is to have it passed down or to buy another waterman out. On the open market alone, a tidal fish license with all the endorsements can range from $10,000 to $30,000. The seafood business in the state of Maryland is part of our heritage. It's a driving economic force in our communities. We need this to continue by helping all watermen of the state of Maryland. In closing, I want to thank Senator Meyer for bringing this important legislation for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I don't see any hands. Did we hear from Herman Harrison?
He's getting ready to speak.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, madam. I'm Jeff Harrison. I'm the president of Talbot Woodman's Association on the Eastern Shore. I'm also a member of the OAC. We've been very fortunate the last few years that the Chesapeake Bay has been very good to us in a way that we've seen really good spat sets, and the oyster season has been fairly good. Even with COVID, well, we've been able to catch our limits, and even with the markets being bad with restaurants closing. And what's happened, I am the average age of a waterman. I'm 64 years old, and we're seeing some younger people getting into it. And it's really good to see, because I know some of the politicians over here had talked about phasing us out. Well, we're actually phasing out on ourselves. If we don't get some younger watermen involved in this, there won't be any watermen left. And like I said, it's very good that now that we've had this good oyster season and we have plenty of oysters, that we have younger people that are coming into it, especially these past 2 years. And most of them are coming right out of high school, and they definitely need some kind of boost up. And this bill would definitely help with that. So I hope that you do a favorable on this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just very quickly, would each of you please share with us what part of the state you're from so we can get a handle on that?
Yeah, I'm from Talbot County, Choptank River, in that area on the eastern shore.
Thank you, sir.
Baltimore County.
Queen Anne County.
Anne Arundel County, but we also oyster and fish and crab in Solomons, so Calvert County.
Well, I've worked in all the counties, but right now I'm currently in Calvert Counny.
Calvert County. Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Very diverse.
Thank you.
Well, we do. We have to travel to make most of our living. You've got to be able to adjust where we are, and that's the main goal for us. Is we all kind of stick together and try to work together when we can.
Good. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Vital.
Thank you. I just want to thank you all for being here today. The weather's beautiful, and you could have been out doing something else, but, you know, I love seafood. I've grown up in Maryland my whole life, and I love seafood, but I will tell you, I love seeing these two ladies. I've never been on a boat with a female captain, so I'd love to do that sometime, but thank
I
you.
literally looked at my business card and I said, I knew I should have brought that.
We have your information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for letting us come speak. Thank you.
Okay. We're going next to Senate Bill 271, Senator Kramer, Economic Development, Eligibility for State Job Creation Incentives. And we have two oral panelists, Donna Edwards and Christopher Meyer. You take the time, Senator, that you need to lay out your bill, and then your panelists will have 2 minutes each.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair, and I will do just that, and I don't think we'll take up a lot of the committee's time. Colleagues, Ben Kramer introducing Senate Bill 671, which is basically a bill for us to discuss policy, and what I would proffer to the committee is good policy. The state offers tens of millions of dollars in the way of job creation, tax credits, and grants. But we don't have the conversation about how are those tax dollars, our residents' tax dollars, being utilized to best serve the residents of the state. Senate Bill 671 takes up that issue. It's about ensuring that if we're going to take our residents' tax dollars and we're going to invest it in business grants, we have an expectation of getting a return on that investment. And that return is in our workforce and in ensuring that we are lifting up with those tax dollars the workers in the state. We want to provide those workers the opportunity to then reinvest themselves in our state economy by ensuring that they are receiving fair pay and that we are creating good jobs to build our state economy with those tax dollars that we are providing in the way of job creation tax credits. The bill simply provides that when we are doing this, the policy we put out there says the positions, and I'm not going to hit on every one of the itemized requirements, it's in the bill before you, but it just simply states the position's located within the state. It's a full-time job, and it either pays the prevailing wage if applicable, and if not applicable, 150% of the minimum wage. The job will provide paid leave, that the employees are covered by unemployment insurance benefits and entitled to workers' compensation benefits, and that the position, among other things, offers retirement benefits. So with this bill, we are saying, all right, maybe there is some benefit in it. To date, there is a lot of question as to what benefits the state receives in exchange for these tax credits and grants. This is putting into place the framework to ensure that when we do take these tax dollars and invest them into these companies and these businesses, that investment is then put into the workers who are the resources to make these companies profitable, and that they in turn benefit and share those benefits, because ultimately they'll grow our economy if they're paid a decent wage and they're receiving a good job. That's really it, very straightforward. And with that, Madam Chair, we have the outstanding president of the Maryland, D.C. AFL-CIO, Ms. Donna Edwards, with us. And I'll turn it over to her, Madam Chair.
Okay, are there any questions for the sponsor? Senator Reedy.
One question pops to mind. Don't we already require paid leave now? So wouldn't pretty much every business do this?
And depending on, I believe that under most circumstances, the answer is yes, which is why it just shows how easy peasy this bill will be for you to vote for it, Senator Reedy, because that aspect is already being done in large part.
In large part, it's interesting. So I think if you have under a certain number of employees, you do not have to provide paid leave, which was a carve out for very small businesses. So your bill is saying if you're a real small business, just don't bother with the job creation tax credit then.
No, not don't bother, but if you're receiving the benefit of these taxpayer dollars, then also ensure that your employees share in that benefit. That's all it says.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go next to Donna Edwards.
Good afternoon again, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Donna Edwards. I'm president of the Maryland State and D.C. AFL-CIO. I want to thank our sponsor, Senator Kramer. He did an excellent job of laying out this bill. You have our written testimony. The most important thing is that we do give millions of dollars annually, and you invest that money. You act as the people who are investing the taxpayers' money in the future of Maryland. And the bulk of that money is coming from workers who make $40,000 to $200,000. That's the majority of our taxpayers' money that we're using. And what we're asking in this bill is that we create a good job upon our investment. And we're just borrowing the language that you've already passed in the Clean Energy Jobs Act, and you also passed it in House Bill 278 last year. So this isn't a new concept. This has already been done. And this is businesses that are asking for this money. And so just like when we have workers that are receiving unemployment and they have certain things that they have to do and provide, and they have to show that they are looking for work every week, then we're asking, if you ask for this money, then you as the policymakers and our investors have an absolute right to say, these are the things we want you to create with the dollars that we're giving you. The other part is that there is a reporting requirement here Maryland passed a reporting process and an audit in 2012. We got a lot of traction from the Pew Institute, but that was 10 years ago. So this is updating a reporting process, and it's really good policy making, and it helps you keep on track. So we're asking for a favorable report for Senate Bill 671. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, if not, then we're going on to Mr. Meyer.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Christopher Meyer. I'm a research analyst at the Maryland Center on Economic Policy. We are a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization that works to build equitable prosperity in Maryland through research-backed policy. We're here in strong support of Senate Bill 671. Maryland spends millions of dollars each year on business subsidies with the stated goal of growing business investment and job opportunities. However, Maryland legislative analysts and academic researchers have repeatedly found that these programs are rarely effective. Senate Bill 671 would improve our business subsidy programs by establishing basic, built-in, consistent job quality standards. This bill is based on a simple principle. When we spend public dollars with the goal of creating jobs, they should be good jobs. What does that mean? Family supporting wages, decent benefits like affordable health care, paid leave, retirement benefits, and eligibility for unemployment and workers' comp. These are the protections workers would have under Senate Bill 671. As families across Maryland are struggling to make ends meet, particularly Marylanders of color, who too often are locked out of opportunity by structural barriers, we should invest our shared resources in good jobs that build opportunity for all, not simply use tax breaks to further tilt the scales in favor of the powerful few, which is what these subsidy programs often do when they're not paired with strong job quality standards. For these reasons, I'm respectfully asking for a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, if not, then that ends the testimony on this bill.
All right, thank you again.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And Senator Kramer, you may stay right there. We've got 733 coming up next. Community Solar Energy Generating Systems Pilot Program Alterations. And let's see, we need James Feinstein, John Fiestro, Francis Yuhas, and Katie Lanzarato. Oh, wait a minute. No, we'll take the first three. Let's do that. Okay, and Mr. Sponsor, you have all the time you need to lay out the parameters of your bill, and panelists, you have 2 minutes each.
Thank you for that, Madam Chair. Just like the last bill, I don't think we will be taking up too much of the committee's time with this straightforward legislative proposal, and maybe the opposition wants to save the committee time and they'll just decide to wave to you, tell you they oppose it, and go home. Madam Chair, Ben Kramer here introducing Senate Bill 733. And basically what the bill does expands the opportunity for our residents to participate in community solar. It would allow for residents in one electric utility service territory to subscribe to a community solar array that exists in another utility service territory. And the reason that that's important is that depending on what the marketplace may be, there might be limitations on opportunities for those who want to enjoy the benefits of being in community solar. It'll limit their ability to do that if there are no projects open to them within their service territory. This is a circumstance that has happened in areas throughout the state, and in particular, Howard County, where their residents are in the BGE territory, and there were no opportunities for them to participate, yet there were opportunities within Pepco's territory, but they were locked out. So the goal here is that if I am in one territory and I'm looking to participate in community solar generation, enjoy the financial benefits, as well as do my part with regard to the greening of our energy in the state, this bill will afford me that opportunity if there are no generating opportunities within my territory. Now, quickly, I'd like to address just a couple of the concerns that I think folks are reading a little too much into it than is actually the case. So there's been concern expressed by our utilities that this will create a bookkeeping nightmare, and it will not. First of all, the bill, when we first began discussing it, was very prescriptive. And we decided, no, that's not the route to go. Let's leave it to the Public Service Commission to take a look at how best to accomplish what can be done. So, for instance, there's a question about what if the credit in one region is different than in the territory where the subscriber is now going to be participating. The easy answer to that is the credit will be wherever the generating facility is. Whatever that credit is, that's the credit. So even if I am living in a utility territory where the credit might be 8 cents and now is 10 cents, and the territory where I am going to be participating, the credit's 8 cents, that's what I'll get, 8 cents. The territory where it's happening, where the facility is located, that'll be my credit. We don't have to worry about trade-offs and one utility or another having to figure out what the exchange rate's going to be. Very easy, very straightforward, very basic. We also can ensure, and again, the Public Service Commission will have full autonomy to do this, but there were questions raised about, well, how does utility A get the money over to utility B, and it's complicated and we're not set up for that. Well, what we can end up doing is having the subscriber entity fill that gap so that the utilities don't have to worry about it at all. Again, ultimately, the PSC will take a look at that, but it's an easy mechanism. Utility A puts the money into the subscriber entity. The subscriber entity then puts the money into utility B so that the utilities don't have any bookkeeping to do that causes them angst. So the point here is that it can be done. It can be done easily. It has been done, I believe, most recently in Massachusetts. We can accomplish it, but we are leaving the details to the Public Service Commission, where I think at the end of the day, they are certainly best suited, and we took out all the prescriptive information or standards out of the bill so that they can do that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Senator Hershey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question. Senator, you mentioned things like marketplace limitations, no projects open if no generating opportunities exist. What's the basis for all of that? Are we simply just not building enough community solar projects in the state of Maryland?
Could quite possibly be that. We have limitations within each territory. as to how much can be built out within a territory.
Right.
And there can be a host of reasons, and it can be more challenging for residents in Baltimore City to find opportunities within their utility territory. And we don't want to shut out anyone from having the opportunity to participate. And so the point here is, let's look globally as opposed to being very isolated and having silos.
You also mentioned that the PSC could put forward a lot of the regulations that deal with this legislation. This is still a pilot program, right? I mean, we're still in the pilot. We did extend it, but it's still a pilot program. And aren't we waiting for a PSC report this year that is going to kind of be a facts and findings of how this works? And we would expect a number of suggestions and recommendations from the PSC in that report?
No, go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, just, that was it.
Okay.
Aren't we waiting for that report to see what the PSC's findings are before we look to make a number of changes? We, had another bill that you provided that wants to expand the cap. I just haven't heard that we have reached the caps in each of these service areas yet, that we produced, we have so many community solar projects in certain service territories that it's now necessary to go outside those service territories to find projects. Now, we don't deal necessarily with the economics of these projects. Maybe that's something we should start getting into when we talk to community solar developers to see, hey, do they just not want to be in a certain area because the land costs more and it's easier to go somewhere else where it's less expensive? But again, wouldn't it be beneficial for all of us to wait until we see the Public Service Commission's report and decide how we then modify this pilot program?
No, and I thank you for that question. And my response to that would be that this should be an important piece of that pilot as we go forward, so that when the Public Service Commission does their report, and I believe in 2024, that's when we'll be getting some final ideas from the PSC on this. We want them at that point in time to be able to take a look and say, you know what, yeah, being able to open it up to allow cross-utility billing on this, that it made sense and it works, and so that's part of the conversation and the discussion. If we lock this opportunity out now, we're not going to have that as part of the discussion. And that's why I think the timing on this is important, and I think the merits for it are significant for the future of community solar generation, and that's why I think our acting timely to get this into the pilot project will give us that chance to have good feedback on how we're going to do this going forward. So I appreciate what you're saying, but I think the timing on this is important for the reasons I just shared.
Okay, and then just one other thing based on all that. Maybe it would be important for this committee to see the queue of projects that are in the Public Service Commission right now that are going through the process in order to be approved, to really know if there is this backlog of projects in certain areas that are just not being able to get approved because of the reasons that you said. I think that they might be more from the economics of it, but if they can't get through the licensing process, then maybe we should know that, and that might help us make decisions.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Senator Augustine?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I share many of the concerns of my senator down here. I thought this was a pilot program. Is this not a pilot program?
The answer is yes, it is
So if it's
a pilot program.
So if it's a pilot program, wouldn't it make sense for us to wait for the findings of that, not muddy it up? There's not real clarity on the efficacy of this anyway. So I think it probably makes more sense for us to wait and see what the results of the pilot are before we start bringing into things that may impact ratepayers when you're going across different, service territories, which I'm always concerned about.
And there is nothing under the bill before us that would do any harm to ratepayers.
We don't know that.
Other than, well, I think we do.
No, we
And
surely
so-
do not.
So, well, then, we will agree to disagree, but there is nothing under this bill that would do harm to ratepayers, and in fact, would provide benefits to those who want to get the benefits by participating, the financial benefits, not to mention their desire to participate, again, in green energy.
There are other people
But-
beside those who choose to participate, right? Would you agree that they would potentially have to be subsidizing some of this, potentially?
No, I completely disagree with you on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay. All right, we'll go now to your panelists, and we're going to hear first from James Feinstein, and then from John Fiastro. And did Francis Yuhas come? Okay, we're going in that order. You have 2 minutes each.
Senators Kelly and Feldman, and esteemed members of the Senate Finance Committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify here today. I am James Feinstein, co-chair of the Coalition for Community Solar Access Maryland Committee. I'm an active participant of the Public Service Commission's RM56 working group, which is actively working to improve the community solar program, and I'm the policy and regulatory lead for Arcadia. Arcadia is actively managing more than 57 megawatts across 28 projects in Maryland today, and we have more than 500 megawatts of community solar under management nationwide, making us the largest community solar residential subscriber in the nation. As the CSEG's community solar program exists in Maryland today, there are arbitrary geographic barriers drawn along utility service territories. And a household interested in community solar may only subscribe to a project located in their own territory and is actively prohibited from subscribing to a project located in another. This is problematic because the supply of projects and the demand from customers are not evenly matched in any territory. As such, not all Marylanders have the same access to community solar. This legislation will allow the statewide demand for projects to meet the statewide supply and would allow all households in the state to have equal access to community solar. So everyone has the same opportunity to support renewable energy development and receive monthly bill savings. This is not a new concept. In Massachusetts, legislation passed last year to allow cross-utility crediting in one of their community solar programs. And in the other program, 2 of the 3 major utilities are already required to do cross-utility crediting today. I urge a favorable report of Senate Bill 733 and look forward to your questions.
Okay, are there any questions? All right, if not, then we're going on to John Fiastro.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Senate Finance Committee. For the record, my name is John Fiastro here on behalf of Arcadia. Madam Chair, we want to thank the sponsor, Senator Kramer, for putting this piece of legislation in. In my opinion, this is a modernization of the pilot program where we're going to be addressing one of the shortfalls. And one of the shortfalls is this. I think no one really estimated, no one really knew in 2015 how popular this program would be. And Senator Hershey, to one of your questions, I mean, this idea of how do we have to serve the market here, and what's the demand, and how are we trying to make that up? You know, I don't think at the time we really imagined that there would be large companies. In the case of Arcadia, 57 megawatts allocated across 28 different projects, serving thousands and thousands of customers in the state. You know, the easiest way to satisfy a customer is to provide them the product that they sign up for on day one. And this legislation actually allows for that. Where there is available capacity within Maryland, Arcadia will be able to attribute that capacity to a subscriber on day one. The day that a subscriber signs up with Arcadia, they'll be able to enjoy the benefits and savings associated with renewable energy and community solar. And Senator Augustine, you and I have had many conversations over the years about cross-subsidization and the impacts of bills, of pieces of legislation historically on your constituents, and I agree. I don't think this bill is one of them. And here's a few reasons why. The first is that We have already established net metering as a concept. This bill does nothing to increase the capacity limits for net metering as it relates to community solar. It does nothing to necessarily destabilize any kind of arrangement of bill pay in the state as it relates to net metering. Those who are paying and those who are enjoying the benefits will remain the same, although they might be in different service territories, and that might be the only difference here. So I had prepared comments, Madam Chair, but I thought it appropriate to answer a few of the questions that were brought up earlier, and with that, I conclude my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, now we'll go to our final witness in favor of the program, and that's Frances Yuhas.
Good afternoon. Yes, my name is Frances Yuhas. I'm a lifelong resident of Anne Arundel County, Maryland, and Director of Project Management for the Mid-Atlantic region for Turning Point Energy. I've been working to mainstream the use of solar energy for 17 years. I support Senate Bill 733 because I truly believe it will allow a majority of Marylanders to access clean, renewable energy. I made a conscious decision to put a rooftop solar array on my home in 2005. Not because I'm an early technology adopter, but because of my unwavering commitment to transform our energy future one small step at a time. It was perhaps not a prudent financial decision way back then, but my husband and I believe it was the right thing to do based on our societal convictions and demonstrating that solar energy has a meaningful place at the energy table. But not everyone is in a position to place a solar array on their own roofs for various reasons. They might not be oriented properly, the right configuration, there might be too much shading, they might not own their home, they might live in a condominium unit, or they might live in an apartment building. And then there's the challenge of the upfront cost. So community solar allows people who cannot put solar on their own roofs to subscribe and enjoy the benefits of the clean, renewable energy. So, Senate Bill 733, related to community solar, will allow electricity consumers that access to clean, renewable energy, no matter where in Maryland the community solar generating system is located. Similar to the example that Senator Kramer described about the Howard County resident, I'm in a similar situation. I live here in Anne Arundel County, and I am currently on a wait list to subscribe to a community solar project because there are none available yet in the BGE service territory. So I am, committed to providing meaningful community solar projects for energy consumers, and I hope that you will allow the same based on supply and demand. So please support Senate Bill 733. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hershey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can I go back to Mr. Fiastro real quick?
Go ahead.
You brought up something, and your testimony mentioned it as well. Again, too, we did conversation about net metering. Obviously, this is virtual net energy metering. Do we know if the Public Service Commissioner, has anybody taken a look and said, how much of this virtual net energy metering that we could absorb before everybody else, ends up having to pay for all of those that are benefiting off community solar?
The Public Service Commission has an active net metering working group center.
Mm-hmm.
They make an annual report to the General Assembly required by statute. In fact, I think there was a bill earlier this session that dealt with the timing of that report.
Right.
That would be a matter that could be brought up in the report, and I'm sure that they would be eager to provide that information.
Okay.
And it also might wind up in the pilot program report at the end of the pilot program.
That's
Senator,
yeah,
can I stress one thing? I mean, this bill is less about projects and the ability of the state's distribution system to absorb those projects. This bill, Senate Bill 733, is more of an accounting bill. Where are the credits taken and where are they applied? And that is really less about where the projects are, what the total amount, at what point do we reach a saturation rate? Earlier in session, we heard phrases called death spiral in this committee, but on another bill. It's less about that. This is about accounting. where the credits are generated, on what bills they're applied, and it has less really to do about where the projects are actually built. We're trying to bring
Right, but-
efficiency to the overall program.
But none of that is necessary if the projects remain inside the service territory where the original pilot program designed them to be, right? So it
That's
does
the-
have to do with
That's
siting.
the current posture of the program.
Correct. So, I mean, unless you sought to move projects outside of the service territory, we wouldn't have the issue that you just spoke about. the
I
accounting
wouldn't
issue.
necessarily look at it as moving a project outside the service territory as much as having a project in another service territory, having a customer that wants and demands a product today and being able to connect them to that product as soon as possible.
Right. And
I mean,
that's-
I mean, and I'll defer to my colleagues here, I don't think the idea is to necessarily build and attract somewhere else. It's trying to bring that supply, that demand that exists today and is unmet to whatever project that can be found as soon as possible. But, you know, I'm about to get to the end of the deep end of the pool center,
Right.
and maybe I'll hand it off to
We've
two of
been
these
there
members
before, so, let me just say, I mean, again, I'm agreeing with my colleague down here as well, too. You know, this is a pilot program, and I think rather than changing legislation to, hey, let's see if this works, and then the Public Service Commission can respond to that, I mean, we really might be better off to let this pilot program run out the way that we, in this committee, sent it forward as a pilot, and the Public Service Commission to come back and say exactly, you know, the things that you guys are saying, hey, that, you know, there wasn't enough projects, and maybe we should go outside of this, and things, that they would give it enough thought before we just go forward with these, because I do get concerned, and we've had many discussions about how far net metering can go before it just becomes a subsidy for everybody else that can't participate in it. Because at the end of the day, not everybody can participate in community solar, no matter how many community solar projects are out there, because if that happened, then nobody's paying for distribution. So we do need to hear from the Public Service Commission how far we can go. That's why this bill, when we passed it, was it in 14 or 15, you know, had limits to it. It had caps on it. And I think it's important that we go forward within the bounds of the caps until we hear something more specific from the Public Service
And
Commission.
Senator Hershey, and just a quick reply to that, look,
Yep.
over the course of a decade, with changing technology, look where solar was a decade ago. Infancy. For what it's worth, it still may be considered in its infancy, but it has grown dramatically in our understanding of how to make it function, how the technology has advanced the solar panels themselves, our abilities and our capacities, and to think that we should simply remain static with blinders on during the course of a decade for a pilot project because we're not going to recognize the world as it is changing and the technology and the opportunities. That's what this is about. It shouldn't just be static. It should be a recognition, a policy decision. Hey, here's a new opportunity within what we are doing that will provide greater access to community solar for those who aren't able to access it right now. Let's incorporate that into the study so that when we get to that point, we'll know, yeah, this is good policy. Maybe the Public Service Commission will come back and go, no, there were too many problems, it was too complex. Or they might come back and say, it was simplistic, we were able to get there. And yes, so now we are saying it is good policy because we've had the chance to incorporate it into the pilot project. And I think with something like this, of course, it's going to be changing. And I think we should be limber and flexible enough to be able to recognize that and adapt.
Well, Senator, I agree with a lot of those statements. Again, you're on the other side of the street. I guess you passed the pilot program in that committee. This pilot program did not get passed until the last day of session. And it was because there were so many concerns on what this was going to look like, and again, how many people would subscribe to that. And I agree that that is a good thing for people that want lower cost energy. But again, with virtual net energy metering, somebody else is paying for the distribution of those electrons through a community solar system. And I just get concerned on if we go too far, have we gotten in a position where this is completely subsidized by those that can't participate in these types of programs?
And think of all those people who are the beneficiaries every summer right now when we hit that peak summer heat and their rates, they're paying peak rates because of solar. There is the opportunity to bring everybody's rates down because that peak demand comes down by virtue of solar, and everybody benefits from that, including our lowest income families, who, by the way, we didn't get into that discussion today, but look, the environmental justice piece of this is part of every conversation and discussion about the climate crisis, and it is our lowest income families who are suffering most about what our failures to have addressed this issue sooner.
And
So
I
I think
agree.
that's all part of the conversation as well.
And I think we just have to be cautious that we don't pass too many policies that make it more expensive for them
I don't
to-
disagree.
to purchase electric. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now, we have another panel of unfavorables, and I will call those persons up now. Katie Lanzarato, Pepco and Delmarva Powell, David Schatz, Pepco and Delmarva, Davesh Gupta, BGE, and Charles Washington, BGE. You have 2 minutes each. And the mics are movable.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair Feldman, and members of the Senate Finance Committee. My name is Katie Lanzarato, here on behalf of Pepco and Delmarva Power. With me today is Dave Schatz, who's our Director of Strategy for PHI, and he's come at my request and is here to answer any questions you may have for our company. You have our written testimony, but I'll add that currently PHI does not have access to the meter data of a community solar project's energy production that's located outside of our service territory, which is needed to fulfill the intent of this bill. As a result, PHI would not be able to determine a community solar subscriber's allocated share and credit them accordingly. I'd also like to note that the cost of providing service to customers varies across Maryland. Under this bill, a community solar project that is built in DPL, Maryland, could have a customer or a subscriber that is in First Energy's service territory. However, the energy, generation, capacity, transmission, and distribution charges in DPL and First Energy are different. The First Energy customer subscriber may get a higher value offset than the value of that energy, generation, capacity, transmission, and distribution charges in the First Energy service territory. The practical result is a cross-subsidization between customers from different utilities that will impact any non-customer or non-subscribers in another service area. Pepco and Delmarva Power support community solar as an opportunity for customers to benefit from solar energy. However, this bill is structured in a way that makes it challenging to bring the equitable benefits of community solar to customers in Maryland. Therefore, we respectfully request an unfavorable report on the bill.
All right, are there any questions of this witness? Okay, if not, then we're going to move on to Dave Schatz.
Madam Chair, I'm just here as a subject matter expert. I'd request if there are any questions from
All
the.
right, Senator Kramer.
Madam Chair, thank you, and I missed my chance to jump at your asking if there were any questions. Let me ask you this. You just offered in your testimony your concern about the difference in what that credit might be in one territory or another, and therefore there would be a cross-subsidy. Would you be good enough to opine on my comments introducing the bill that the subsidy would remain whatever the subsidy is in the territory where the facility is located? Does that not address your concern? So in other words, if I'm in A and the facility's in B and the benefit in A is 10 cents, but it's only 8 cents in B, I'll get the 8 cents. Is that easy for you to understand, and does that then address? because it takes away this complete issue of the higher value offsets and cross subsidies that has to be calculated.
Senator, I'll answer this question. I think you still have an issue because the cost of providing the service differs between utility territories. And so the credit that would be offered, and if there is a difference between the credit and offset and the cost to serve, you have an inconsistency there that I think would have to be worked out through significant process. and a
Doesn't the
lot of
credit
protocol.
represent, as it is, the credit, for instance, it may be 8 cents over here or 10 cents there, based on the calculations you're referring to now?
Respectfully, I don't agree. I think that there are inherent differences between an electron that's created, generated in a certain service territory and distributed there, and the electron that's generated and consumed within a different service territory. So
But
there
the
is
credit, but I'm asking you, the credit, where it's generated and served, is the credit the subscriber is going to get. So it could be back in their service territory, those electrons are busy doing something that's costing more money. But that credit reflects what's happening in that territory. The credit the subscriber's going to get is in the territory that you just described where it was a different cost to make it happen over here. That's why the credit is what it is here, and it happens to be different than over here. And my point is, they'll get, the subscriber gets whatever the credit is in that territory reflecting your costs in that territory.
I still think there is an inconsistency, Senator, and I think that would lead to a lot of confusion.
And that's
would be
usually
a
the
lot
red
of-
herring we
Wait,
get,
wait
that
a
there's
minute.
confusion when there's not a legitimate answer.
Let him
Thank you,
finish
Madam Chair.
answering, though. Yeah. Did you finish your answer?
Yes, I respectfully disagree, Senator. I think that there are still economic inconsistencies. I think that's borne out in the testimony provided to the committee from the Public Service Commission on this very topic. So I look forward to discussing it further. I
Thank
appreciate it.
Okay, all right. Dave? Let's see, where
Yep,
we-
that was
Dabesh?
Madam Chair, if you wouldn't mind if I could go next.
Okay, go ahead, Charles.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Vice Chair Feldman and members of the committee. My name is Charles Washington, here on behalf of BGE in respectful opposition to Senate Bill 733.
You
My
might
colleague-
want to pull that mic a little closer.
Sure. My colleague, Devesh Gupta, will provide the substantive concerns from BGE, which really kind of overlap quite well with what PHI has already shared. But I did want to share a few thoughts. The first is that BGE is supportive of the community solar program. And in fact, we would welcome an opportunity to speak with the good senator from District 19 about ways that we could be more involved in the process if the pilot moves to full implementation. We do believe we can create more community solar opportunities, especially for limited income customers, whether they be in Howard County or elsewhere. But I'd like to direct you to the commission's written comments, as my colleague Dave Schatz just did, where they discuss a number of technical challenges in the bill. With the greatest of respect to the sponsor, I do believe those challenges would be difficult to address, that the crediting system would be more complex than has been suggested, and that it would take time to sort out those issues. You heard a witness say earlier that we could not have predicted the need for this legislation when the original bill was enacted, and I would say that that's not true. I worked on this bill along with your committee and Economic Matters, and what I recall is that the complexities of cross-utility subsidization were definitely discussed, and that was the reason that the existing statute requires a subscriber to be in the same service territory as the project, to avoid those challenges that were identified at that time. You've also heard that this bill does nothing to raise the cap on community solar. And I just say that that's not really a forthcoming message, because you know that there's another bill before your committee that does just that, and that bill is from the same sponsor. You've heard that this bill would leave it to the commission to solve the challenges, and that is true, except the bill doesn't give the time to solve the challenges. We'd be requested to provide an implementation filing in November of this year. The commission would be required to approve it in January of next year. And as we look at all the challenges and the costs that it would take our ratepayers to help us solve them, we don't think that that's enough time. We don't think that you have the information before you to protect ratepayers from this issue. I'll just say one more thing that is curious for me to note, and that's that the National Association for Community Solar, CCSA, who is usually so active in Annapolis, so active in Baltimore before the Public Service Commission, is for some reason not here supporting this bill today. And that makes me wonder what their thoughts would be on these challenges that we're talking about rushing to solve for this issue in advance of the end of this pilot. You know, I agree with some of the senators who have spoken before, and really the conclusion the commission came to in their filing, which is we're reaching the end of this pilot. This is something that we should talk about if the pilot is going to move to full implementation as we chart the future for community solar, not rushing to do at the end of the pilot program. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you very much. BGE opposes this bill, and we will urge an unfavorable committee report.
Okay, don't see any other hands, so that ends the discussion on this. Oh, wait a minute, oh yeah, we jumped over you, didn't we? Okay.
Devesh Gupta, Director of Strategy for Baltimore Gas and Electric. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today about SB 733. To start, BG continues to see significant growth in adoption of community solar through its current pilot program. In 2021, the program increased to over 34 megawatts of solar generation, supplying over 4,000 customers through 25 projects. BG provided bill credits for 31,000 megawatt hours at a value of $3.6 million to those customers in 2021. 2022 could see those project and customer numbers more than double. The program continues to grow and serves customers without the challenging revisions required under the bill. BG is particularly concerned that the bill would require utilities to develop expensive systems and processes during only a pilot program period in order to transfer monthly bill credits to a community solar customer's bill, regardless of whether the solar is located in the same utility territory as the customer. Accounting for differences between territories represents a complex challenge that would require time to consider and solve. In addition, stakeholders must have time to examine net metering in one utility's territory, subsidized by ratepayers in that utility's territory, while system and environmental benefits of the solar project, if any, are gained by a different utility. Again, all of this, if feasible, would take substantial time to develop and implement. Instead of the compressed timeframe set out in the bill, review of these issues would be more appropriate for consideration once the community solar pilot report is delivered to the General Assembly at the conclusion of the pilot in just over 2 years. For the reasons stated above, BG respectfully requests an unfavorable report on Senate Bill 733.
Are there any questions? Senator Kramer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Gupta, quick question. I'm reading testimony from the Howard County Climate Action organization, and in their testimony they say, many members in our organization who live in the BGE territory have had to wait many months to join a community solar project if or until one is available in BGE. We heard testimony that a resident of BGE territory in Anne Arundel County is locked out from participating in community solar. What do you suggest they do if the opportunities are not available in your territory? What do? They just don't get to participate as opposed to be given an opportunity to become members of a different program located in a different territory?
Respectfully, Senator, there are many different opportunities for customers. Part of the challenge here is that subscriber organizations do have to go out and do the marketing. They have to go out, the project developers have to go out and do the siting. It's third-party developers, and there are always challenges for solar projects, regardless of where they're sited. And we're seeing that play out in real time, and certainly the report will bear out what the challenges have been and how those challenges can be solved.
And with all due respect, you didn't answer my question. Now you're putting it on the developers saying, well, it's their fault for not having built something else in our territory. I have no idea what they may or may not be doing, what those limitations may be. But what I am reading to you here is concerns that within BGE territory, and you're saying, I'm here to testify against the opportunity for these people to go elsewhere in a different territory, and yet evidently within your territory, you're not providing what they need.
Well, Senator, with respect, the end of your question, you said that we're not providing what they need, but the truth is, utilities are barred from participating in community solar.
I didn't mean, I'm saying that BGE is not providing to them the opportunity. And all I'm asking is, so your statement is, even if we do not have it so that our customers can participate, we're going to come in and testify against the opportunity for them to participate at all then.
So we certainly have not testified that our customers should not have the opportunity to participate. And we would welcome them to participate when there's a project available for them to subscribe in. You know, what I would say, Senator, is that if you are concerned that BGE isn't doing enough to make these projects available to our customers, we would welcome a future bill that allows utilities to be a part of the process and to build out projects, community solar projects within their service territory.
There's a bill before us right now, Charles, that will provide opportunities for the residents of Mr. Gupta's territory to participate in community solar. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Did I hear everybody? Okay. I don't see any further hands, so that ends the testimony.
Thank you, Madam
on
Chair.
that bill. Okay. Is this the last? Okay. All right, we're going to hear next from Senator Hershey on Senate Bill 902, Dams with Hydroelectric Power Plants Annual Compensation Fee. And I'll ask the following people to come up. James Mullen, Associate, the Organization of Westerman, and Herman Harrison, the Talbot Waterman Association.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Mullen is in EHE, but Jeff Harrison has been kind enough to stay for this piece of legislation.
You take the time as sponsor to lay out your bill, and then all witnesses have 2 minutes each.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, Senator Steve Hershey to present Senate Bill 902. Interesting that we've had two bills that deal with our commercial watermen today in this committee. Probably haven't seen any in all of my years here, but it just goes to what my colleague had brought to us before, the struggles that the commercial watermen are going through in these times, not just because of the business environment that's out there, but also because of the environmental pressures that are out there as well, too. And one of the biggest issues that our commercial watermen have is finding shell, native Chesapeake Bay shell that is very important for our seed on shell programs that we have used very successfully over a number of years that have helped restore the population of the oysters in the Chesapeake Bay. So before you, I'm bringing a kind of an interesting bill. I'll admit it is a scaled-down version of a bill that was looked upon earlier in session by the House and decided to not move forward with it. But I thought that it was at least the right opportunity to bring in a piece of legislation that could help the commercial watermen based on policies that we've set. And so, Madam Chair, Senate Bill 902 is simply a bill that would take the Conowingo Dam, which participates in our RPS Tier 2 program, and ask Exelon, through the participation of that program, to make a contribution to the Chesapeake Bay Trust, and thus Chesapeake Bay Trust would make a contribution to the county oyster committees for the purchase specifically of shell in the Chesapeake Bay public waters. This bill is based on the fact that just last year, if everybody remembers, we passed Senate Bill 65. Madam Chair, that was your bill that we ended up expanding or got expanded over into the House. But importantly, it brought Tier 2 back into the RPS. Tier 2 had expired. And it expired because in the original RPS, there was only one energy generating dam facility that was in Maryland and still in Maryland at the time. And the thought was that that dam did not really need to be subsidized. The Conowingo Dam was built and opened up in 1928, 92 years old, and we are still providing subsidies in our RPS program for that dam. So this bill just simply takes a portion, or asks Exelon to contribute a portion of the money that that they are receiving through the sales of these RECs, again, through ratepayer subsidies, back into, as I said, the Chesapeake Bay Trust and the County Oyster Committees. So what does this cost Constellation? Well, really nothing. I mean, because if we had not passed the policy to add Tier 2 back into the RPS, they wouldn't be able to sell any of the RECs into the Maryland market to begin with. So, but the fiscal note was correct in the way it calculates what we're looking for. The dam produces 1.6 million megawatt hours. If we use the 2020 Tier 2 average REC price was $1.06, that equates to about $106 million. Again, these are ratepayer subsidies that Constellation is able to get through the sale of these Tier 2 RECs. This legislation would ask for a contribution from Constellation of 80% of the REC price, the total REC price based on the megawatt hours that they produce. And then 75% of that would go to the commercial watermen. So that's about $1 million, and that was the target number that we were looking for when we decided that we would get 75% from the Chesapeake Bay Trust and only 80% of the Exelon's funds from the sale of the Tier 2 RECs. I don't think that this is a big ask for Exelon. I think that they have been good corporate governance as far as the Chesapeake Bay. They've helped out with many different types of things. But unfortunately, we are in a position, as we've heard earlier today, where the commercial watermen are really struggling. And most importantly, from the oystermen, they are struggling to get shelled. And the only way that we can get shell right now, or they can get shell right now, is really through the purchasing back of any oysters that have been harvested and shucked, and then being able to purchase those shells back. The commercial watermen through the county oyster committees then purchase spat from Horn Point. Then they do all the work of putting the spat and the shell back overboard into the public fishery so that these oysters can grow and they can be, one, used for the ecological advantages, and then two, be able to be harvested. So, Madam Chair, I know there was a letter of concern from the Public Service Commission, and again, like I said, this was a bill that has kind of morphed into what I've got. I made an error in saying that the PSC could play a role in what the rates would be. Obviously, and on the generation side, that is the deregulated side. PSC has no say in what those rates are, so I have removed Section D through that and gave them the period of time that they needed to in order to implement that. So, like I said, Jeff is here, and I think he can really talk to the specifics of what's necessary, but I think it's a small price to ask for a 92-year-old energy generating facility that has been there for so long. It is very important to us, but at the same time, I think it's time that Exelon can help contribute to this specific cause. Madam Chair, I'd appreciate a favorable committee report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, Senator Kramer.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Hersey, refresh my memory. Conowingo.
Yep.
Does it provide any energy to Maryland customers?
Absolutely. It provides energy into the PJM grid, which then, of course, serves many, many Maryland customers.
My understanding is that it serves exclusively Pennsylvania residents. Am I mistaken in that? I recall in the past having looked at that, and my understanding is that the service generated by Conowingo is directed to Pennsylvania residents. Is that?
Senator, I am not aware of that. There are a few dams that are on the Susquehanna River, some that are closer to the Pennsylvania border, but I would have to imagine that as close as that dam is, that energy generating facility, that the energy would go straight out into the transmission and distribution system from there serving Maryland customers.
Maybe we need to look into that, because that's my recollection
Sure.
as to having looked into it. That
Now-
we're not the beneficiaries of that energy being generated, but thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Mullen?
It's Mr. Harrison.
Jeff
Yes, I'm Jeff Harrison.
Okay, thank you.
It's okay. I'm the president of Talbot Woodrum Association, but I'm also the chair of our Oyster Shell Committee. Each county around the state that borders the bay has an Oyster Shell Committee. What we do is this time of year, we're actually preparing to put shells and seed overboard in April and May. Our problem is that we generate in Talbot County just about $300,000 a year through bushel taxes and surcharges and a little bit of MDOT money that we get. And the problem is that over the past 7 or 8 years, the price of shell is continuously going up. It was $2.50 just back in 2010. There's also a transportation fee. All these shells mostly come from Virginia. They're hauled on boats up here. That was $1.50, so we could get them here for $4. The past 2 years, it went up again another $1. And then this year, when we got our budget, it basically had a question mark on it because they really don't know the price of shells, and that's very concerning to us. Like I say, in Talbot County, we spend about $300,000 a year. We're able to buy maybe 40 to 50,000 bushels of shells with that. This year, we're not sure, and our real problem is that we need to find funds somewhere. We have asked to increase our bushel tax. That tax has been on since 1960 or something. It's $1 then, it's $1 now, but we've been unable to do that. I'm not sure why. And so we're looking for funds pretty much anywhere we can get them. And it's basically just to hold our own. It's not really to buy additional. We would love to be able to buy more than what we've been buying. Because as I said before, the bay is doing something out there now, and when we put shells overboard now, we see results. And so we're asking for a favorable vote on this bill.
Okay, are there any questions?
Madam Chair, just, it is important to recognize that they did bring forward to many of us a request to increase the bushel tax. And that is a tax that ends up getting paid for the product that they're harvesting. So that's how important it is that they are able to generate some money. And again, I wouldn't just ask any old business to come in here and do that, but specifically because of the policy that we created last year when we brought Tier 2 back, I thought it was a great opportunity for a funding source for Exelon to be able to help with not only the health of the Chesapeake Bay, but more specifically with the oyster restoration and harvesting.
But one thing is that you certainly raised that we've got a problem and there's a supply and demand disconnect. And we've got to try our best to address it. And we'll have to spend some time. Maybe you might want to put a work group together, people on the committee interested in this issue, to see what we can come up with.
I'd be happy to clarify some things and put together more suggestions. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, sir.
We're going, Senator Hershey, you may stay in place.
Oh, okay.
You're 903, Renewable Energy Portfolio Standard, Qualifying Biomass and Thermal Biomass Systems. And let's see, in favor of your bill, we have Beth Hill, William Miles, and Emmanuel Wagner.
I think I'll forward it. Fantastic. You guys showed up. I didn't think you'd come. Busy day today.
All
Guys can
right.
come on up if you want.
Oh, you may come on up.
You can come on up.
The mics are movable. Senator Hirsch, as sponsor, will get the time he needs to explain the bill, and then each of you will have 2 minutes each.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, for the record, Senator Steve Hershey to present Senate Bill 903. Members of the committee, we took a brief look at this piece of legislation last year. It's very simple, but it provides more options to reach our RPS goals, more specifically the TRECs, or thermal renewable energy credits, by increasing two things within the RPS. One, the forestry biomass, or many people call it woody biomass, that is listed in our RPS and certainly helps to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. That specific areas that deals with silviculture and natural wood waste, I know Beth is going to talk about in some detail. Important to know that bioenergy replaces heating oil, natural gas, and coal, mostly used for heating. And so it has been very important in many areas, especially in the lower eastern shore, where we've looked at, we use it in Eastern Correctional Institute and University of Maryland Eastern Shore. There's also another change that deals with the thermobiomass system. It's really kind of a technical change and strikes the word primarily to allow us to include more than just the animal manure and poultry litter, but also any of the food waste and probably more specifically the poultry bedding material, so that all of that can be used in creating energy out in the farming area. So, Madam Chair, we've got a very good panel, and I would sincerely ask for a favorable committee report.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, then we'll go to Beth Hill next.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee members, for allowing me the opportunity to voice my support for Senate Bill 903, Renewable Energy Portfolio and Thermal Biomass Systems. For the record, I'm Beth Hill, Executive Director of the Maryland Forest Association. We represent the entire forest community statewide. MFA is a conservation-minded group that wants to see forests remain as forests. 70% of our members are family forest landowners. Our members' top reasons for concern are lack of markets, forest health, and development pressure. We believe the forest that pays stays and that strong markets are key to conservation efforts and maintaining forest health. Maryland desperately needs a market for low-value wood. This bill is simply asking for wood energy to be clearly decoupled from animal manure when applying for TRECs. Which would make projects a reality. Wood energy could be a small part of Maryland's current RPS, but provide significant benefits to the environment, like reducing greenhouse gas emissions as outlined in the 2030 Greenhouse Gas Emission Reduction Act plan. Also, it helps support energy independence and keeps the RPS versatile. So wood residues are sourced locally from abundant forest and urban wood waste. They could be utilized instead of landfilled and create local jobs. Using wood for energy could also help maintain and improve forest stands and provide an economic incentive for landowners to participate in forest management and retain ownership of their forest land. Also helps to invest in Maryland. So creating TRECs for wood energy would achieve immediate legislative actions recommended by the 2021 Forestry Economic Adjustment Strategy and the 2022 Task Force on the Economic Future of Western Maryland. In summary, MFA supports Senate Bill 903, and we respectfully ask for a favorable report, as forests are our greatest renewable resource. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, we'll move then to William Miles.
Hello, Madam Chairman. Bill Miles, members of the committee with the forest products industry. Not too much to add to what the sponsor said and Beth Hill said, but to try to, having been a committee staffer for my younger days, to kind of cut through it real quick. And this bill is really basically a technical bill with one change. And the technical part is defining, slash and brush. The code mentions, it defines silvicultural products, and COMAR defines natural wood waste. So rather than have whimsical terms in the RPS, that's clarification of where those two sources are that really define the forest product we're talking about. The substantive part is the word primarily. Some of you probably don't remember this. It was about 12 years ago or so. Senator Kelly, I think you would remember this, when we were working with then AG Doug Gansler on a project called FiberShore to basically take wood and poultry litter. We were working with Purdue at the time to build a 10-megawatt facility with poultry litter and wood, okay? And at the time, we were instructed that the best way to kind of help the market for that, to sell these RECs, would be to come down there and give an edge to animal manure and poultry litter. So we came down, and that's exactly what we did, and the bill passed with flying colors. Well, now that's been kind of like a splinter in terms of how the forest industry is able to really benefit from the RPS, because we've been in it at Tier 1 since Delegate Carol Petzold, and we all worked all those years back in the early 2002, 2003. But that word primarily was designed to help a project that never happened and will never happen, and we're living with that word primarily that gives animal manure and poultry litter an edge as a fuel source preference to qualify for a thermal biomass REC. And what we're saying is the market looks at that and says, forget it, because it's not going to happen. So by taking out the word primarily, that puts wood products, Tier 1, qualifying biomass, along with animal manure and poultry litter on the same level playing field as a fuel source. And there are no projects in Maryland. This might help. Will it be the panacea for a biomass project? We hope so, but we don't know. But that primarily, we respectfully ask you to come out. And the committee did a good thing last year when we had the mill residue. Remember the mill residue as part of black liquor? The way the bill was introduced would have taken mill residue out with black liquor. And I actually talked to your committee counsel one evening, and I don't know if that's the same young man or not, and he understood exactly, and this committee was savvy enough to take that out to stop that. Now, one last thing I'll finish up with, Madam Chair. Back in 2009, the General Assembly passed probably America's most historic Sustainable Forestry Act. It was called the Sustainable Forestry Act of 2009. This young man here and I worked together hand in hand on it. And in Chapter 175, amongst the various things that it says that the state of Maryland shall give preference to biomass fuel facilities when developing public facilities to the extent practical. So we have no facilities, we have preference in the law, we have this word primarily that's killing us. And hopefully you'll take that out, and we respectfully urge you to do that, please.
Okay, any questions? All right. Okay, we'll go next to Emmanuel Wagner.
My turn?
Did you miss this?
Is there Emmanuel Wagner?
Is Emmanuel Wagner here?
Did you sign up, Gary?
Sure, I did sign up. Gary Allen?
Okay, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chairman. My name is Gary Allen. I'm the president of the Maryland Forestry Foundation. It's been my pleasure to work with these folks on the preparation of this bill and its advocacy for the last several years. I want to add my voice. Actually, I'm tempted to say use the word ditto in light of their particular comments, but I'd like to add just a couple explanatory comments with respect to material first that's already been submitted to your committee, and I want to call your attention to it and underline it. Obviously, there are a great many conflicts and schedules, and some people couldn't be with us today, and one of them is Dr. Virginia Dahl, who is a professor at the University of Tennessee, who has provided a written testimony providing scientific basis for the positions and articulated benefits that Beth outlined a little bit earlier in her testimony. I want to call your attention to that testimony as a way of helping to understand the scientific benefits of biomass as a part of Maryland's clean energy future. We think it's essential that we look at biomass as a part of Maryland's clean energy future because that will allow us to provide additional economic incentives for our landowners across the state, again, as Bill and Beth and the senator have outlined to you specifically. there's a lot of concern among a lot of people about whether or not this is the nose of the camel under the tent, so to speak. Let me simply say that for those of us who are advocates in this position, we certainly understand the concern, but recognize that biomass is inherently a small part of the TREC market. It's a local incentive for a renewable product available here in Maryland. And we hope that the ideological considerations that might drive some to oppose this can be set aside, and you look honestly at the science, the opportunity, the incentives, and the benefits of this product as a part of Maryland's energy future. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Jennings?
Thank you. This is for the entire panel. I don't know who can answer this, but I know where I live, I have Eastern Sanitary Landfill, and one of the issues is a lot of the tree companies, when they have trees that go down from storms or just any tree company, they usually chip up most of the small stuff, and they have nowhere to put it. Sometimes they give it to mulch companies, they get overloaded. And then we've had fights with the landfill because they don't want it, because there's no, it should go somewhere else. Would that type of product, could that be used in a facility like this?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I'm guessing that you should probably have testimony, written testimony in favor from the Maryland Arborist Association.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. Did we hear from everybody? Everybody at the table. Oh, okay. All right. Okay. We're going next to Dion Banks, Joe Henson, Gary Allen.
That's me.
Oh, that was you. Okay.
I did.
Good. Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm Joe Henson. I'm a consulting forester in Salisbury, Maryland, and I do a lot of work with companies that have operations that would otherwise qualify for thermal biomass renewable energy credits. Everything that needs to be said has been said. This bill removes an ambiguity in the law and paves the way for those companies to use their existing operations and apply for thermal biomass RECs. And as Beth noted and the good senator noted, that does pave the way to use a lot of waste wood, including the urban waste wood that's generated by tree companies, as well as wooden pallets that have exceeded their life expectancy and have no place to go. So biomass is a good product. We're going to see more of it in the future, and this would help us greatly in Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our final witness is an unfavorable, and that's Doug Myers from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Doug Myers. I'm the Maryland Senior Scientist at Chesapeake Bay Foundation, registering with the Chesapeake Climate Action Network Action Fund, Sierra Club, Maryland Chapter, Chesapeake Physicians for Social Responsibility, Indivisible, Howard County, and Elders Climate Action Maryland, as opposed to Senate Bill 903. CBF and the above-listed organizations oppose Senate Bill 903, which broadens the definition of qualifying biomass as a Tier 1 renewable energy source and allows those sources to be burned directly as fuel. The allowance of silviculture products and natural wood waste to be burned directly as fuel has the potential to increase deforestation across the state, generate more greenhouse gases than the natural decomposition of those components of forestry, and emit soot particles known to cause respiratory diseases. For the understanding of how wood is renewable, trees are growing for 80 to 100 years. They're harvested. All the time that they're growing, they're sequestering carbon. When they're burned, they're releasing that carbon immediately. There are systems that can burn wood waste more cleanly. This bill does not specify that those systems be used. This bill fails to address unsustainable forestry practices that may be subsidized by this shift in policy. Current analysis by the Mitigation Working Group of the Maryland Commission on Climate Change is underway that focuses on the impacts of woody biomass and other sources to the other Tier 1 sources that exist within the portfolio. It is premature to expand biomass, especially used as fuel, as a Tier 1 resource. The recommendations for how or if to include biomass as a Tier 1 is due later this year, and we should be giving that body the opportunity to complete this analysis. I urge an unfavorable report from the committee. Thank you.
Are there any, Senator Reedy?
Okay, thank you. Can I ask you a question here? I'm looking through the testimony, and I guess I'm concerned or a little confused because I know we want to increase renewable energy.
Yes.
And clean energy. We burn trash in the state already, which I know some of your groups are not fond of, but to me, this actually is a cleaner, some of what we're talking about here is actually cleaner than some of the things we already burn. Now, I'm not going to ask you because you're going to tell me you don't like that either, and I understand.
Right.
How are we going to get to the goals that we have if we don't utilize everything at our disposal for renewable energy?
Well, I wanted to clarify what was said by the panel before, that this term of primarily being reserved for animal waste, there's part of my written testimony that deals specifically with that. That is we're not burning chicken litter directly. We're putting it through an anaerobic digestion process that creates biogas, which is then fairly cleanly burned. There's other systems that can be used to burn even woody biomass more cleanly. The bill does not direct toward that. And so if you were to take the very perfect definition of primarily, and I think this was what was shared with the panel last year, that would be 51% of the thermal RECs would go to those chicken litter and other animal manure sources, leaving 49% of the thermal RECs available. And we've heard from the panel that there are no projects, so I don't understand how our current policy is really preventing those projects from coming online.
Well, as a follow-up, if there was an adjustment to the bill to be a little more specific in the areas you're talking about, would we be able to move forward?
We met with the proponents during the interim to try to voice our concerns and have this bill be more explicit about life cycle analyses for greenhouse gases in the forest rotation cycle, how forests should be managed to minimize the production of woody waste, and all these other issues. None of that made it into this bill.
Let me have one more follow-up, if I might, Madam Chair. You talked about how we don't just burn chicken litter directly, obviously, it goes through a process. Doesn't is that process, and is that process itself is going to expend energy to do?
Generally
correct?
not. It's bacteria that are decomposing it through
decomposes with bacteria.
fermentation. It's kind of like winemaking.
I just, as I look and there's some testimony from some different groups here. I mean, we are, of course, another committee today is going to be discussing extensively climate change related issues. We've got already a very aggressive greenhouse gas reduction goal. I think
Yes.
it seems to me we need to be trying to figure out, look at all kinds of sources, and they may not all be pristinely perfect as perfect as we might like for, maybe I don't know, something like nuclear power or water power, but we need to try to take advantages of all the, this is a statement on the question. I think we should try to take advantage of lots of sources of energy, but thank you for
I
your
agree,
answer.
and there are a number of RPS bills in the legislature this year, and as I did mention, there is a study going on with the Climate Change Commission on Climate Change to look at the various fuel sources that are proposed to be in the Tier 1 to see which mix of fuels are actually the most clean.
Because wood is a renewable resource.
It is. It's like I said, 80 years to grow it, about a second to burn it. It's going to release a lot of greenhouse gases in the short term.
Senator Hershey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Isn't biomass energy considered a replacement for heating oil?
I don't know, because we've asked specifically of that question to the proponents, if you could tell us any of the market forcings that are actually requiring a replacement of heating oil. Yes, has the potential to, but we don't really know how much displacement of heating fuel is actually going on.
Are you familiar with the projects down at University of Maryland Eastern
I
Shore?
am, yes, and I thought it was very interesting that we're using that same project or that same location to suggest we should build a new gas pipeline down to that area to replace the wood burning that's happening there.
Yeah, that's one of the concerns. There's also a lot of economic development that needs the same natural gas that every other county in the state has. Would you think that biomass energy replaces natural gas, as you said? Yes?
It could, and I think this is why we have drawn a separate line on the animal manure biogas, because that can be put directly into existing natural gas lines, and we know that that is displacing natural gas, fossil natural gas.
Through anaerobic digestion.
Correct.
Which is one process that could be used for.
Yep.
If you don't have that, and I know that's just trying to come online in another number of pilot projects that we have down on the lower shore. What happens to poultry litter if it's not being able to go into anaerobic digestion or become energy? Do you know where that ends up going?
It's subject to the phosphorus management tool, which is going to be spread on various
Spread on farms, trucked up to other farms that need the phosphorus, so we're putting that back into the ground as
Correct,
well.
but only where it can be uptaken by plants without causing a water quality problem. And this actually helps to contribute to the biomass, or the biogas digesters actually help to contribute to that goal under the phosphorus management tool.
The other comment that my colleague made was waste wood and where that's ending up. That's ending up in landfills. What's happening with that waste wood when it ends up in a landfill?
I think that is something we definitely need to address. This bill doesn't do that because in a landfill, it will turn into methane. And it's often, unless that landfill is equipped with methane capture technology, it could become a fugitive emission, which is a more powerful greenhouse gas than CO2. So yeah, I think there are a lot of folks looking into how methane emissions from all different sources are controlled and captured.
So wouldn't it be more beneficial to turn that waste wood into energy?
It might on the, if all of that is taken into account, which is why I'm interested in the life cycle analysis that the Climate Change Commission is looking into, because it's going to take a look at the life cycle of sequestration and release of emissions of wood versus all the other ways you can address that. So if it's a matter of putting a methane capture on a landfill versus creating a tier 1 for this source, they're going to be putting forth recommendations of which of those mixes of policies will have the best greenhouse gas reduction benefits.
And then finally, would you agree with the testimony that this biomass energy is very localized? We're not seeing this all throughout the state, right?
Correct. Yeah, it's generally where there's forest practices. And I think it is true, there's quite a bit of wood waste that's generated within urban tree management as well.
Right, and so maybe this helps that if,
yeah, I think
that wood waste into the
yeah, I think this
landfills.
bill could use some work to be more specific about the benefits of greenhouse gas reduction, not just claiming that it happens. I do still question whether we need to change the primarily language in order to make projects that these gentlemen and ladies are suggesting happen in Maryland. I don't think they're not happening for lack of this subsidy.
Right, but isn't all this greenhouse gas emissions based on modeling? I mean, have we really done calculations on all of this to see if it works? I mean, do we know that we have reduced greenhouse gas emissions, or do we just say that, hey, this model's out to be this way, therefore if we reduce it, then therefore it happened?
What I'm always told about models is that all of them are wrong, but some of them are useful.
Right.
And the ones that are useful have good data going into them. So I think the models that were being used by the commission are taking a look at, the real empirical studies where they have the greenhouse gas emission reductions data and plugging those in for the different systems.
It's interesting that they've targeted the methane at the landfills with this, and all of a sudden that modeling was fine. Renewable natural gas was a great thing, but I guess some advocates don't like renewable natural gas no matter what, so all of a sudden that modeling is flawed now. And
well, I think those flaws were they didn't capture a lot of the sources that were out there.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. All right, that ends the testimony on that bill. We're going next to Senate Bill 719, Senator Benson. Human Services Office of Home Energy Programs, Uniform Redetermination Process. And Senator, you will take the time you need to explain your bill, and you have the following witnesses: Cindy Carter, Laurel Peltier, and Tammy Bresnahan. And each of you will have 2 minutes. And in fact, let me tell you the order in which we've got these others. Cindy Carter will come up first, and then Tammy and Laurel third, where you signed up.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, Vice Chair Feldman, and members of the committee. I hope you all don't mind my taking my mask off because this COVID-19 poking in my nose has not helped me. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 719. Like Senate Bill 905, this bill is to help seniors who are able to take advantage grants offered to Marylanders through the Office of Home Energy Programs, but have difficulty with mobility or working through the process. The purpose of this bill is to make it easier for households within a 65-year-old and older residents to stay enrolled in energy assistance programs by streamlining the eligibility redetermination process. The process this bill proposes is currently outlined in the Office of Home Energy Programs, OHIP, 2021 Operations Manual. We want to codify this into law to ensure all of the local OHIP officers around the state are following the process. Currently, a person enrolled in energy assistance programs would need to know they had to apply for redetermination annually. Often, the year goes by and their eligibility ends because they didn't request, complete, and submit a redetermination letter. If they do, and they remain eligible, then after 3 years, that individual must start the application process over again. This bill does two things. It would ensure all enrollees would receive a uniform redetermination letter in the mail that provides them with the ability to answer questions regarding any change to their status that would impact their eligibility. Number two, it would remove the requirement to reapply after 3 years. No new application would be necessary as long as the customer indicates that there are no changes to the information that determines their eligibility. I was surprised by the fiscal note by this bill. While I acknowledge some initial budgetary outlay for standardizing the letter, let me repeat. While I acknowledge some initial budgetary outlay for standardizing the letter, mailing it out and providing postage-free return envelopes, it is hard to imagine the need for 23 additional full-time positions to facilitate this process. Ultimately, this bill will actually save OHIP work and money by reducing the number of applications, given the funds allocated to them for the staffing of previous programs, such as critical medical needs and other programs. I may feel it necessary to request an audit of OHIP's operations. Because this bill creates relief and access to currently obscure and cumbersome process, I believe it is the right thing to do, and I do not believe it requires the funds as stated in the fiscal note. And because of this, I would urge a favorable consideration of House Bill 719.
To the panelists in this order: Cindy Carter, Tammy Bresnahan, and Laurel Peltier. and you each have 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Committee. I'm Cindy Carter. I'm the co-founder of Critical Medical Needs, Executive Director of Cancer Support Foundation, and a member of the low-income work group that's presently going on. I'm here in support of Senate Bill 719. I want to do a special shout-out thanks to Senator Benson for her leadership with this bill and the next one we're going to be talking about today. This is a program that's already in place. The redetermination started in 2018 in the Energy Assistance Department. We have found out that a lot of our seniors weren't getting the letters of redetermination, even though the program's been in place. So I asked, what is the program? And I was told that the database from the state is sent to the local offices telling them of everybody who's 65 and older, they should have a redetermination letter sent out. The catch is, it's not mandated for them to send the letter out. So some of the seniors were getting it, and some of the seniors weren't getting it. What it does is a letter goes to the household, and if the household signs that everything's the same, income, number of people there, name on the bill, all of that information gets checked by OHIP anyway when you send the letter back to make sure the Social Security number is still good. Then OHIP would automatically send out the letter. If the information comes back that is correct, they'll redetermine and give them the grants for the next year. However, that's only good for 3 years. So if you have somebody who's 66, 7 years old, they get a redetermination letter, and they get one for every 3 years, and they get the grants, guess what? 3 years later, now they're up in their 70s, they have to go find somebody to help them figure out how to do the application again. 3 years later, they have to do the same thing. So what we're asking for in this bill is to have this uniform across the state, make this equitable for all seniors, so everybody is able to get it. Right now, a lot of the people, offices are already doing it. So I, too, was mystified in why automatically now they need 23 people to do this when it's already being done at a lot of the offices. To make it uniform and to not have our seniors that we're trying to help them age safely in place have to go through that whole arduous process every 3 years. I thank you. I'm here in support, and I ask for a favorable support on Senate Bill 719. Excuse me.
Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Finance Committee. I am Tammy Bresnahan, Director of Advocacy for AARP Maryland, and we overwhelmingly support this bill. As a caseworker who worked in about 6 local departments of social services in my tenure at the Department of Human Services, I too am mystified. When I first started in the department in 1980-something, we had to do redetermination hearings for AFDC, or now temporary cash assistance, every 6 months. And that same caseworker had to do those redetermination hearings. So I am mystified as well that you're only going to send a letter, have them check the boxes. And as we know, retired people don't necessarily have more income unless something dramatic happens. They inherit something, they win the lottery. And so what we're asking is that they just do their job. And asking for additional 23 more people just doesn't make sense. So we are here to ask you for a favorable report, and like Senator Benson says, maybe they need an audit. Again, I'm Tammy Bresnahan, and we ask for a favorable report of Senate Bill 719.
Thank you. I don't see any hands. Okay. And L'Oreal Peltier.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, who's not here in committee. I'm Laurel Peltier, and we have 2 bills, so I'm just going to explain a little bit about what I do, because I actually work every single week with these seniors, trying to help them get their energy assistance, and this is an unbelievable bill, because this energy assistance operation is pretty tricky to get through. I work at Geico Cares. I am the chair of Energy Advocates, and basically I spend all my time looking at low-income utility issues, and there's a lot of them. Our low-income segment's huge. It's 400,000 people. We only serve 85,000 households in OHEP. We have very high denial rates. I don't know if your constituents call you guys and say they've been trying to get energy assistance. One of the big reasons is our state has really pushed the online portal, and that's a different bill. What this bill is, I work mostly with seniors in Baltimore City in Senator Washington's district, in person and on the phone. And this bill just, once you're in, and you're in your 70s and your 80s, you should be in. We basically force our seniors to go every single year, either have their kids apply for them online, which they can't even do, or go back into a local office, which in the rural areas could be 25 miles away, and apply year after year after year when nothing changes. It's a really terrific tactical fix for something that theoretically should be happening consistently across the local offices, and it isn't. So all of our coalition, everybody that we work with, just shout out for this bill. It is a brilliant bill, so thanks for your time.
Thank you. All right. Well, that looks like the testimony on that good bill. And we're going to Senator Benson. Stay right there, and your panel can stay. We're going to do Senate Bill 905. We have the same panel. This is Human Services, Silver Energy Savers Program, and Energy Assistance Fund. And we'll just take the same panelists. All the rules are the same. All right, Senator Benson.
Good afternoon, Chair Kelly, once again, and members of this committee. Thank you for the opportunity to present Senate Bill 905. This bill addresses access to energy assistance grants for seniors. For the purposes of this bill and the PROS program, a senior is anyone 60 years of age and above. Grants available to pay for the utility bills of qualifying seniors have significantly significant positive impact on their health, welfare, and housing security. Currently, 41% of the Marylanders eligible for energy assistance grants are 60 years older and above. Yet, only a little more than a third of these seniors that apply actually have access to the funds because of incomplete applications. The application process is cumbersome and has too many obstacles to successful completion and submission. Some of the biggest hurdles are the requirement of individuals to physically go to an OHIP office and to provide backup documents that the individual may not have on hand. This bill provides customer service call centers to help seniors navigate the paperwork and the process for submitting an application for Office of Home Energy Program system. 211 will provide the 4 designated centers in Maryland: Southern Maryland, Eastern Shore, Central Maryland, and Western Maryland. This service will assist seniors with the entire process. Among other things, the call center will work with the local OHIP offices. They will work with the applicant to help them understand and answer application questions correctly, help them to obtain missing documents, and provide for a telephonic signature which is necessary in cases where the individual can't get transportation to an OHIP office. In summary, this bill ensures that anyone over 60 that is eligible to is able to access the funds available to them to assist with paying their bills and keeping them from making a decision between utilities and other essentials such as food and medication. For this reason, I request a favorable report for Senate Bill 905.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just ask you before we go to the panel. The persons who sign up for this program do have an income cutoff, right? And
Yes.
as I think somebody said before, very few people, when they're elderly, start to make a lot more money. Most of them have less, don't they?
You want me to answer that? It goes by the same requirement that everybody else has for eligibility, remembering that last year there was a bill passed saying those that are 67 and above now have a higher income threshold, which means we have a lot of seniors that used to miss getting into energy assistance by $1 that now will be eligible for energy assistance, which then, if you do the redetermination, could get in the system and be there the rest of their lives and be protected in their homes. But yes, it goes by the same state regulation as everyone else. But
Okay.
the exception is we've got the 67 and above with a higher income, which opens it up to a lot more seniors.
Okay. All right. So let's go in this order. Cindy Carter, Tammy Bresnahan, and Laurel Peltier.
Good afternoon, Madam Kelly, Madam Chair, Kelly, and committee. Cancer Support Foundation, I'm Executive Director. I'm the co-founder of Critical Medical Needs. I'm Cindy Carter. This program is pretty much modeled, this new program is modeled on the success that we saw with the Critical Medical Needs Program, which offers hands-on assistance for everybody that, in that case, that have illnesses. We need to really emphasize that if we're going to be serious about our seniors aging safely in place, they've got to have one of the basics of life, and that's keeping their lights and their heat on. They can't have somebody to come in and help them with care. They can't take care of themselves. They can't do anything without their lights and the heat. 41% of those eligible for energy assistance in Maryland, as the senator said, are seniors, 60 and above. That's the biggest, largest group that we have. And as they get older, they have less family support in many cases. Unfortunately, we've seen that for 17 years that I've been in business. And they also lose some of the capacity to be able to understand how to do things. And getting through energy assistance, I've worked with that agency for over a decade. It is a major challenge for anybody, and our seniors really need somebody to talk to on the phone to walk them through. What this would do would set up 4 locations. The whole state would be covered. A senior could call up 211 on the Eastern Shore, Central Maryland, Southern Maryland, or Western Maryland. They could talk to a live person who would be their person from the beginning until the time the grant's done. They would walk them through by filling in the application. They would walk them through and say, okay, here's a backup you need. Do you have the ability to take a picture on the phone, or do you have a computer, or do you have some way to get the document? Well, some of the seniors are going to say, no, I like the old-fashioned phone. I don't understand what you're talking about. Fine, then they would work with the local agencies and get a home visit, which is already supposed to be provided by OHEP anyway, to pick up the documents. That whole package would then be sent by the 211, and that's why we're talking to 211. 211's expertise is their support letter, and the folder should even say from the head of United Way to pick up the phone. They have a system that they talk to people on the phone and walk them through their issues. Besides that, they also have the understanding of how to get problems solved. So with the application filled in, with the documents taken care of, the 211 would send that application to their local OHEP office, get it processed, resolve any issues, get back to the client when the grants are done, and say, hey, Mrs. Smith, everything's done. Here's what you're going to get. This is what it means. You don't have to do anything. It gets paid to your utility company. And watch for your if you're over 65, watch for your redetermination letter next year. And verify everything's the same if it is, and send it in, and we'll be there always to help you. That's the kind of service our seniors need. Now, this would be 4 locations, so you have up to maybe 4 people. However, the fiscal note said the state would need 24 people. How could 24 people be needed for this program if there are only 4 centers up to 4 people that are helping all the seniors to start with? I would think this would cut down the work of the centers considerably, because they could be dealing with thousands and thousands of seniors. Most of the work is getting the application completed and the documents with it. That application is only 4 pages, but it goes over 6 grants that somebody's supposed to read and understand and know what to answer. So if you can get help, which they would be in this program, getting the application filled in and all the backup and putting it in all at the same time, the chances of that senior being successful have really, really gone up. The centers, those 4 centers would be doing the work, not the state agencies. All they're doing is taking the application, checking the verification systems they have against it, and doing the processing. So there again, I don't understand whether 24 need for 24 people when these 4 centers would have only up to 3 to 4 people. So I am here and hope that we have a favorable report for Senate Bill 905. Make sure our seniors can age safely in place. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Tammy?
Good afternoon. I'm Tammy Bresnahan, Director of Advocacy for ARP Maryland. We have asking for a favorable report on Senate Bill 905. This all makes sense, and I'm not sure why OHEP and the department seem to think that this is going to be a large fiscal note. I mean, 211 is supportive, and this is a place for people to call. And maybe it does seem there's a little bit of a disconnect with the Office of Home Energy Programs and the local jurisdictions. Some of them are run by the county base, some of them are granted out. And it seems like to me, by listening to people, that OHEP, the office that is located at 311 West Saratoga Street, who is supposed to have oversight authority, they don't feel like, even though they grant this money out to these local agencies, they don't feel like that they have oversight ability, that they can't tell them what to do, that they can't audit them. And it doesn't make sense that this is state money, federal money, LIHEAP money, that comes into the state agency has regulatory control, that they can't make local jurisdictions do certain things like go out and collect documents if somebody can't get into their office. So Cindy, trying to make sure that people get services, have worked with 211, and they are trying to make sure that people get a telephone call, get their applications filled out, and get that information into the agency so they can get the energy assistance that they need. It's simple, it's easy, and it's not $1.5 million. We ask for a favorable report on Senate Bill 905.
Thank you.
I think I'm the last one.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, I'm going to share a constituent story. Again, I'm Laurel Peltier. I felt the best way to learn about low-income energy issues was to actually work and provide low-income energy assistance. So what I do 2 hours a week, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, is I just sit and help people. And I'm going to read to you a story from a senior from 3 weeks ago, and this just sort of outlines what people are going through. Her name, and she was so excited she was thrilled that her voice would be shared because in my view, she's not an outlier. I just want you to know she's not confused. She's actually has a computer and was still chasing her tail for 2 weeks trying to get energy assistance. To whom it may concern, I'm Donna Brown, and I'm writing this letter on behalf of people such as myself finding it really difficult for me to go online and fill out an application to get help with my BG&E assistance. I want you all to know how much it really meant to me to know that someone took the time and listened to my needs, because the last 2 weeks have been nothing but hell for me not knowing if my BG&E would be turned off. I want you to know this special assistance that I gave this lady, I answered the phone with the intent to help her. That's all I did. I answered the phone with the intent to help her. That was my job. It was a short phone call. She was much further along than she thought. I had to basically pull her off the ceiling because she was so stressed out, which many, many people are with all of these benefits. And this program would provide that service consistently across every single jurisdiction. It would help seniors have a phone, a place to call and a place to get help, the right help, get their applications in and keep the lights on, and not be Tefloned onto another agency. So it's a terrific bill, and Energy Advocates absolutely supports it. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any questions? All right, then that ends the testimony on.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.